Early in the morning, the villagers in the granary were awakened by a panic. The rice in 6 granaries mysteriously disappeared overnight. There were no signs of breaking into the house or carrying the food. All the food had evaporated into thin air, as if it had been confiscated by God. Even more frightening was the fact that the villagers who had attempted to steal from the government began to shudder. This must be retribution. God is warning us. Celine, who was driving away, leisurely opened a bag of small cakes and took a look at the trophies in the space. A full 100,000 tons of rice, neatly piled. She curled her lips slightly. Heavenly punishment? How interesting. She didn't know that the enemy in the distance was planning the next hunt, and her teammates were quietly showing their fangs in the dark. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share. If you like this story, please let me know in the comment section. I will update the next part. Chapter 72. Isn't he better than those men? Take 2 back later. If you don't want to eat them, use them to cover your hands. Celine noticed his gaze and explained casually. Young Mohan didn't respond, but directly picked up 2 pieces of meaty ribs and put them in her bowl, saying lightly, "If you roast it, I will eat it." Celine glanced at him without saying anything, but the corners of her mouth slightly raised in a faint smile. At this time, the 2 of them were living in peace and quiet, while the other people in the caravan were gathered in a room not far away, eating dry food. Although they also brought some meat and rice, they were reluctant to eat them casually. They only ate when they couldn't stand the hunger. I only cook some porridge and rely on compressed biscuits and warm water to fill my stomach on a daily basis. Who is eating pork ribs? They smell so good. Zhang Jiaming couldn't help but mutter as he smelled the fragrance in the air. Who else could it be? It could be anyone who's not here. Someone replied sourly. Zhao Hua half-jokingly suggested, "Since it's ready, why don't you go and get some?" Captain Sun glanced at him indifferently and said in a cold voice, "It's not appropriate to go to eat without being invited, right? They didn't come to find us, which means they don't want us to go." Shu Qing smiled softly at the side. "They don't have much supplies. If we all go together, what will they eat? Don't be too extreme." Zhao Hua smiled and praised her. Miss Shu is still very reasonable. Her character is much better than some people. Shu Qing still responded gently. Everyone has different choices. It's a favor for others to give you things, and it's their duty not to give you things. You can't force it. Her words were well-reasoned, and everyone in the room felt that she was particularly clear-headed, like a ray of warm sunshine, making people feel like they were in a spring breeze. After dinner, Yang Mohan took the initiative to boil water and wash the dishes, while Celine took a few sweet potatoes from the fire and packed them. When she left, she took the sweet potatoes away with her, and the thick gloves she often wore when going out made the operation particularly convenient. Back in the car, Celine filled up the gas tank and walked to Yang Mohan's car. Yang Mohan lowered the window, and Celine asked directly, "Do you need gas?" "Yes." Yang Mohan took out a piece of chocolate from the car and handed it to her. "Since you like it, I'll give it to you." Celine took the chocolate and was secretly shocked. Why did he bring so many snacks? Back in her car, she soaked her feet, applied a facial mask, and watched TV series. Although the car was not spacious, it was tightly covered with curtains, giving her a sense of privacy. After soaking for an hour, she poured out the cold water and replaced it with hot water, and went to bed only after she was completely relaxed. Late at night, a strange cry was faintly heard, which sounded like the sound of wind blowing through a hole in the wall. But after listening to it several times, Celine felt that this sound was not a natural phenomenon. She opened the curtains and looked around, but saw nothing unusual except snow. Just when she decided not to pay attention to it, a shadow quickly passed by the window. In the morning, Celine got up, washed up, and cooked a bowl of hot rice noodles with minced meat, which made her feel warm all over. The rest of the team walked out of the house, exhausted. "It's great that it didn't snow last night," someone said with emotion. The snow had not deepened and the road conditions were good, which boosted the morale of the team. Captain Sun raised his arm and called out, "Let's drive as much as possible today and try to arrive tomorrow." Everyone responded in unison, and Yang Mohan took the opportunity to get close to Celine and asked in a low voice, "Did you hear any strange noises last night?" "I heard it." Celine raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Why? Did you hear the crying too?" Yang Mohan nodded slightly. "It doesn't sound like wind. Maybe someone is playing tricks to scare people." Celine thought about it and felt that it made sense. "I guess he wanted to scare me, but unfortunately, this trick doesn't work on me." As the 2 of them were mumbling, Captain Sun came over and urged them, "Stop chatting, check the condition of the car, and get ready to go." Celine suddenly said, "Someone cried last night, and I didn't sleep well the whole night." As soon as these words came out, people around showed strange expressions. Someone laughed and teased. "If the beauty is scared, you can sleep in my car tonight." The people around laughed, and Celine sneered back. "Okay, if you're capable, come over tonight." The man was stunned, thinking that the opportunity had come, but Celine changed her tone and said, "We are all sisters anyway, you don't mind, right?" His face turned blue in an instant, and he cursed with gritted teeth. "If you dare to say that again, I will kill you." Young Mohan shook his head secretly. She is willing to joke with such an ugly man? Isn't that too casual? Chapter 73. Young Mohan pulled out a dagger from his pocket, twirled it around, and said in a tone that was neither light nor heavy, but full of murderous intent, "Who did you just say you wanted to kill?" The man stared at him, as if he thought this gentleman was not worth his attention, and sneered. "You want to stand up for a woman? Don't you think you have the ability to do it?" Before he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his fist, so fast that no one around him could react, and smashed it directly towards Yang Mohan's face. Celine's eyes flashed, and just as she was about to make a move, she saw the dagger in Yang Mohan's hand fly out instantly and hit the man's fist. "Ah!" A scream echoed in the cold air. Everyone looked up and saw that the man's hand was pierced by a dagger. Blood flowed down the fingers and quickly condensed in the extremely cold temperature. The people around looked at each other and quietly stepped back. Who would have thought that Young Mohan, who looked elegant and godly, was such a person who would draw blood with one strike? "Don't just stand there. Treat is wound quickly." Captain Sun said coldly to break the deadlock. "Also, remember the rules. Anyone who dares to cause trouble again will be kicked out of the convoy." Someone in the crowd whispered, "What is Young Mohan's background?" Captain Sun seems to be particularly protective of him. "They are from the Base Research Institute, not ordinary people." Someone answered in a low voice. "And that's Celine. Don't mess with her. Understand?" This incident was soon over, and the convoy continued on its journey. 2 days later, they finally arrived at the granary, but were stopped by the gatekeeper. Captain Sun stepped forward and said patiently, "We are sent by the base to transport food. This is an order from above. What are you doing?" Armed guards stood at the newly built sentries around the granary and responded coldly. "Who cares about your orders? This granary is ours now. Go back to where you came from." Captain Sun's face darkened. Before he could speak, Young Mohan walked up to him calmly and said softly, "If I'm not mistaken, you are villagers from nearby, right? Illegally occupying a national grain depot is not a wise choice." The guards' expressions changed slightly, and they said stubbornly, "Don't spit bloody words at me." "Oh." Young Mohan smiled faintly and pointed at the little boy playing in the snow in the corner. Captain Sun looked over, and his attitude, which was originally trying to negotiate, suddenly turned tough. "Get out. This granary is not yours." When the other party saw that his identity was exposed, he no longer concealed it and turned around and shouted, "Someone is coming to steal food. Be alert." The alarm sounded immediately, and hundreds of people rushed out of the granary, holding iron bars, hose, and even stones, and surrounded the grain transport team. Even children rushed up and shouted fearlessly, "The grain is ours. Whoever dares to steal it will die." Captain Sun frowned and said nothing. If these people were ordinary bandits, he would not hesitate at all and would kill them directly. But among these people, there were old people and children, and they were obviously forced into a desperate situation. "I understand your situation, but food is a national resource, and there are tens of thousands of people in the base who need it. How about this? We split it equally so that everyone can survive." Captain Sun tried to compromise. "Share it equally? Impossible. At most, I'll give each of you a bag of rice." The village chief flatly refused. The villagers firmly defended the granary, showing a posture of not retreating even if they would rather die. They knew that there was enough food stored here to sustain several generations, and anyone who wanted to steal it would have to step over their dead bodies. Young Mohan walked to the side of Captain Sun and whispered, "They are outnumbered and armed. It's not worth it to fight them head on. Let's retreat first." Captain Sun secretly clenched his fists, feeling unwilling, but he could only order a retreat. "Go." The villagers breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the convoy driving away, but the village chief had a cold look in his eyes. "Keep a close eye on them. Find a chance to deal with them all. Don't let them go back to report the news." At the same time, the convoy stopped at a basketball court to rest. Captain Sun frowned, and the team members also discussed. Why don't we attack at night and kill all the weapons? Captain Sun glanced at him coldly. One stick each of them is enough to deal with you. How can they show mercy to you? The team has a limited number of people and not much ammunition. If we start a war, both sides will suffer. Captain Sun sighed and said, send 2 people back to the base tomorrow to tell them to send reinforcements. Young Mohan sat in Selene's car, looking at the hillside in the distance, and said calmly, the enemy is in the dark and I am in the light. It will be more dangerous to go back and report the news. They will definitely send someone to kill us. Chapter 74. Selene subconsciously looked towards the hillside and vaguely saw several figures swaying, one of whom showed half of his head. It was obvious that the villagers were monitoring them. Sure enough, the other party was not stupid and would not let them return to the base to report the news smoothly. She quickly calculated in her mind, and there was actually a way. She just had to sneak into the granary and store the grain in her own space. However, a more difficult problem followed. How could 100,000 tons of rice appear reasonably? At night, the team camped at the basketball court. There was no house, so everyone slept in the car. Selene spread the fire blanket on the back seat of the car and started to prepare dinner. Young Mohan brought a lot of ingredients and casually suggested, how about hot pot? Sure. She nodded with a smile. The two of them worked together and quickly prepared a sumptuous hot pot feast. Young Mohan took out orange soda and fruit, and the aroma of hot pot filled the cold night. Selene picked up a piece of fish roe and gave it to him, while he put the freshly blanched beef into her bowl. The fragrance made people around them drool. Many people were envious, but they had no way to make friends with them because of their cold personalities. After eating, Captain Sun called a meeting for the team and assigned tasks. Whoever is willing to report back to the base tomorrow will get an extra 200 kilograms of rice when settling accounts. This condition made everyone's eyes light up. Zhang Jiaming and Zhao Hua were the first to recommend themselves. Let's go. Everyone responded, but Captain Sun continued. Whoever can sneak into the granary to get information will be rewarded with an extra 500 kilograms. The scene suddenly became quiet. It was obviously more dangerous to sneak into the grain warehouse. If you were not careful, you might never come back. I'll go. Selene raised her hand. Add me in. Young Mohan followed closely. Captain Sun nodded and said, okay, then the 2 of you will be responsible for sneaking into the granary, and Zhang Jiaming and Zhao Hua will be responsible for returning to the base. Late at night, to prevent an ambush by villagers, Captain Sun personally escorted the 2 away. Selene and Young Mohan quietly approached the granary's perimeter and took advantage of the gap between sentries, changing shifts to climb over the low wall and sneak into the granary. There are 6 warehouses in the granary. Lights are coming out of one of the warehouses, and several villagers are moving rice. Young Mohan whispered, it seems that they are also moving the grain and are not planning to defend it. Selene took a quick look and said, we have only moved 1/3 of Warehouse 1. I guess we have just started moving. In the early morning, the villagers finally stopped moving, locked the warehouse, and left. Young Mohan went to scout the exit, while Selene sneaked into several granaries. At the entrance of the granary, 2 guards leaned against the wall and whispered, I can't sleep during the day, and I'm so sleepy at night. Don't let your guard down. The village chief said someone might have sneaked in. Come 1, beat 1. Come 2, beat a pair. The 2 men swore solemnly, but they didn't notice that there was an extra figure in the granary. Selene looked around and saw a mountain of rice. Rows of 5-meter-high iron racks were neatly stacked with 50-kilogram bags of rice, and each rack held 20,000 bags. She quickly packed the entire rack into the space and emptied a warehouse in less than 10 minutes. She transferred all the food into the space, just to ensure that there would be some food left in the granary when reinforcements arrived at the base. Otherwise, she might lose both her money and her lives. After the 3rd warehouse was emptied, she came to the last warehouse and found that 2 rows of iron racks had been emptied by villagers. Even so, she still took away the remaining food to ensure that these life-saving supplies would not be completely seized. After finishing, Selene quickly left the granary and was about to look for Young Mohan when she saw him standing outside warehouse number 3 observing. She picked up a small stone and threw it at him. Young Mohan turned around and saw her, and his eyes softened immediately. Selene gestured to leave. Young Mohan nodded, and the 2 climbed over the low wall together and quietly returned to the convoy. When they returned to the basketball court, Captain Sun, who had escorted Zhang Jianming and Zhao Huawei, just came back. Have you found out everything? Asked Captain Sun. I understand. Young Mohan picked up a pen and drew a simple map of the granary on paper. Coming in from the main gate is... Although the map was simple, it clearly marked the important areas. Captain Sun looked at the map and nodded with satisfaction. Thank you for your hard work. This mission is completed. Your contribution is obvious to all, and you will be rewarded. 第75章. The next morning, the villagers in the granary fell into chaos and panic. The rice in the 6 granaries had disappeared. It had almost disappeared out of thin air. The villagers were completely panicked, and some even started digging deep underground, but they couldn't find even a grain of rice. The village chief called an emergency meeting with a grim face, slamming the table and saying, the rice in the granary couldn't have disappeared for no reason. Someone must have moved it. The villagers below were confused. Although they did not believe in metaphysics, it was incomprehensible that hundreds of thousands of bags of rice disappeared overnight. The men guarding the granary cried, we didn't leave all night and didn't hear any movement. Someone trembled and said, the granary was not destroyed, and there is no passage on the ground. Did the rice really disappear out of thin air? A group of elderly villagers began to panic, muttering in tears. This is retribution. The granary is the grain reserve for the entire city. We shouldn't occupy it. This must be a punishment from God. Yeah, let's go back to the village. If we stay here any longer, who knows what might happen? Hearing this, many villagers showed signs of retreating, but the village chief snorted coldly. Shut up. Don't scare people with this. If it is really a punishment from heaven, why didn't they confiscate the grain we transported away as well? He didn't believe in gods or ghosts, and he didn't believe that hundreds of thousands of tons of rice would evaporate. He was sure that someone had tampered with the situation and said coldly, check it out. It must have been the work of those people at the base. Someone echoed. After they came, the rice was gone the next day. Who else could it be if not them? The village chief slammed the table and said, everyone grab your weapons and go to the basketball court to stop them. In a short moment, the young and middle-aged men and women in the village were fully armed, holding guns, shovels, and axes, and rushed towards the grain transport team in a mighty manner. At this time, the grain transport team had just woken up. Celine washed up leisurely, changed out of her pajamas, took out a portion of steamed dumplings and soy milk from the space for breakfast, and turned on a movie. Before she could watch for a few minutes, Captain Sun's roar came from outside. Everyone be on guard. Celine opened the curtain and saw hundreds of villagers surrounding her, all with gloomy faces and murderous intent. Captain Sun looked unhappy and stepped forward to ask, what do you want to do? The village chief sneered. Hand over the rice in the granary, or no one can leave. Captain Sun was stunned. What rice? Stop pretending. You are the ones who stole the rice from the granary. Hand it over now so that we can all live in peace. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. Captain Sun was so angry that he laughed. We have so few people, but hundreds of thousands of tons of rice? You really think highly of us. The village chief was too lazy to talk nonsense and waved his hand and ordered, fight. The villagers rushed forward, armed with weapons, and rushed straight to the grain transport team. Captain Sun fired a shot without hesitation. With a bang, the sound of gunfire in the air shocked the villagers to pause for a moment. But soon they rushed forward again, frantically. The grain transport team was not polite either, and they punched the villagers to the ground. Celine pulled out a gleaming tang sword from the car, and with a flick of the sword, the wooden stick was instantly cut into several pieces, as neatly as tofu. Seeing this, the villagers turned pale and dared not rush forward again. Seeing that something was not right, the village chief grabbed a gun and pointed it directly at Captain Sun, preparing to pull the trigger. Bah! A gunshot rang out, and a bloody hole appeared on the village chief's forehead. His eyes widened, his body swayed twice, and he fell in the snow. The villagers were stunned, and all looked at the person who fired the gun. Celine held a rifle and glanced at them coldly. Do you still want to fight? Don't think you are the only ones with guns. Several villagers ran over and helped the village chief up. He opened his mouth, spat out a mouthful of blood, and eventually died. The villagers panicked. Although they were numerous, they obviously could not fight head-on with the grain transport team armed with guns. Captain Sun shouted coldly, "Get lost!" The villagers carried the village chief's body away, and after a few steps they kept swearing, "This matter is not over yet." Captain Sun patted his gun disdainfully. I'm at your service anytime. After the villagers had completely dispersed, Captain Sun called everyone to a meeting. He looked serious. We have completely angered the villagers. We can't delay any longer. We don't know when the reinforcements from the base will arrive. We can only take the initiative now. Young Mohan stood up and analyzed calmly. Only a few villagers have guns. The key is the people on the sentry post. If we can deal with them first, we can attack directly. Captain Sun looked around and asked, any other opinions? Chapter 76. The members of the grain transport team looked at each other, and no one spoke for a while. After a moment, Shu Qing spoke up. I think we can give it a try, but it takes someone with enough skills to kill the sentry. Otherwise, it will alert the enemy and may cause the villagers to counterattack frantically, which will not be worth the loss. Captain Sun nodded. Yang Mohan and Celine sneaked into the granary last night. They are familiar with the terrain. They will lead the team, and we will add 3 more people. Who is willing to recommend themselves? After a moment of silence, a young man stood up and said, I'll go. Then, 2 more people mustered up the courage to step forward. Count us in. Captain Sun wrote down the names of the 3 people, took out the simple map drawn by Yang Mohan, and began to formulate a detailed action plan. 5 people would be responsible for eliminating the sentries, and the other team members would climb over the wall and break in when the time was right, trying to avoid unnecessary casualties as much as possible. As long as the villagers gave up resistance, no innocent people would be harmed. After the plan was agreed upon, Shu Qing frowned slightly. However, I don't think the panic shown by those villagers is fake. It's easy to be exposed if one person pretends, but it's difficult to get the whole village to act together. Someone sneered. They're just a bunch of drama queens. They probably rehearse too much and can't even make up a good excuse. They can even use such a ridiculous excuse as the rice is missing. Yeah, why didn't they say that the ancestral grave was lost? They really look down on our intelligence. Everyone laughed and regarded this as an excuse for the villagers, and no one thought about it anymore. Celine glanced casually, but unexpectedly met Shu Qing's eyes, but the other party quickly looked away. She didn't care and turned back to the car. Celine had no hesitation about tonight's mission. Even if Captain Sun didn't name her, she would take the initiative to participate. As long as the sentry was cleared, she could take out food from the space and save the supplies when the base reinforcements arrived. At noon, Celine was about to ask Yang Mohan what he wanted to eat when she saw a car coming from a distance. A moment later, Zhang Jiaming rolled out of the car in a messy state, with messy hair, dirty clothes, and shivering from the cold. Everyone gathered around, their faces filled with shock. What's going on? Didn't you leave together? Zhang Jiaming panted and trembled as he said, we were ambushed by villagers on the way. Xiaohua was killed when he was trying to protect me, and I ran back desperately. The car broke down, and it took me a long time to fix it. Captain Sun was furious, but he still had someone pour hot water for Zhang Jiaming. After comforting him, he said coldly, these villagers are going too far. We have to beat them up. The crowd's anger instantly reached its maximum. Since they are unkind, don't blame us for being unjust. I thought they were just ordinary villagers who would not harm their lives, but I didn't expect them to be a group of unruly people who would kill without blinking an eye. Celine and Yang Mohan did not join the team's verbal abuse, but walked aside and started to prepare lunch. Yang Mohan took out a bag of chicken wings from the trunk and said with a smile, let's have cola chicken wings today. Celine looked at his always stocked trunk and couldn't help but sigh. How much stuff do you hide? Fun. Yang Mohan threw out 2 words and took out a bag of cod sausage and handed it to her. Eat this while watching TV series. Celine took it and smiled. Thanks. At this time, Shu Qing came over and said timidly, can I borrow some rice? I have run out of food. Then she took out a gold bracelet and said, I'll use this as collateral first. Celine looked at the bracelet and nodded. Okay, but I can only lend you 1 pound. Shu Qing nodded repeatedly, took the rice, and left in a hurry. He didn't even dare to look at their chicken wings and meat for fear of being misunderstood. At the same time, the villagers carried the frozen body of the village chief back to the granary, and the faces of the onlookers, men, women, and children, were filled with shock and anger. Don't you have guns? Why don't you kill them? A woman asked anxiously. If we really use guns, we will carry back more than 1 body. A man explained in a low voice. Our guns are all homemade, and we have very few bullets. Shooting is the worst option. What should we do now? Should we just leave like this? Now that we have no food, what's the point of staying here? Some villagers could not help but began to retreat. But someone shouted with hatred on his face, "The village chief's death cannot be in vain. This revenge must be avenged. Do you have an idea?" Everyone looked at him. The man smiled sinisterly. "Have you heard of the Hungman banquet?" Some villagers nodded, while others shook their heads in confusion. The man said mysteriously, "Let's bury the village chief first, and then we'll have a meeting." After that, all the young and middle-aged people followed him to the meeting room. Chapter 77, Celine, Save Me. In the afternoon, snow fell again, and it was so cold that people could only huddle in the car. Celine had just closed the curtains and was ready to take a nap when she saw young Mohan coming. She opened the car door and asked with a smile, "What's the matter?" "I brought Go Board Games. Want to play a game?" He was wearing a thick coat, but did not look bulky. He shook off the snow on his body before getting in the car and handed over the chessboard with a smile on his face. Celine took the chessboard and teased, "How big is your incubator?" "It has everything." Young Mohan smiled but did not answer. "I just don't know how to play Go. Can you teach me?" Celine said, as if it was a matter of course. "Okay." Young Mohan nodded. The two of them sat in the back seat of the car. Celine opened the curtain on one side, and dim light poured into the car. Young Mohan spoke in a low voice, patiently explaining the rules of Go. In a car not far away, someone looked at them through the gap, his eyes full of envy. Shu Qing was in another car, squeezed in a small space with several men. The air in the car was turbid and smelly, which made her frown. "Ms. Shu, it's not easy for a woman to survive in this world. Why don't you live with us?" A man approached her with a smile. Shu Qing avoided it with disgust. "No need. I have the ability to survive." The men were even more aggressive, and one of them grabbed her hand and said, "Don't leave. It's cold outside. It's warm here. Let go, or I'll be rude to you." Shu Qing struggled, but couldn't get away due to the narrow space. The other man held her shoulders and smiled more frivolously. "Celine, save me!" Shu Qing shouted loudly. Celine heard it and looked over, but then she looked away coldly and continued to play with the chess pieces. She whispered, "Calling Captain Sun is more useful than calling me." Young Mohan had expected this, raised his eyebrows slightly, and reminded softly, "It's your turn." Shu Qing kept shouting until Captain Sun arrived and drove the men away. Shu Qing straightened his clothes, looking grim. "When you go out, especially women, you must be more careful." Captain Sun warned her earnestly. Shu Qing nodded coldly and returned to the car silently. Although the cold carriage was like an ice cave, it was safer than being harassed. In the evening, the snow stopped. A dozen villagers came to the basketball court. Wang Gang, the leader, raised his hands and said, "Don't get me wrong. We are here to talk." "What to talk about?" Captain Sun looked alert. "The grain in the granary does not belong to us. We are willing to return it. We only asked to live in the granary to avoid the cold." Wang Gang's expression seemed sincere. Captain Sun raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Your village chief just died in our hands, and now you want to negotiate? Don't you think it's too fast?" Wang Gang hurriedly explained. "The village chief's actions were too extreme. Now that you have elected me as your representative, I do not want to be your enemy." Another villager added, "We have women, children, and the elderly who want to survive and are willing to negotiate a solution." "So, you admit that the previous food theft was an excuse?" Young Mohan asked calmly. Wang Gang's expression froze slightly, and he nodded in acknowledgement. "Yes. The grain has been in the granary all along, and we just wanted to scare you away. But we know we were wrong, and we would like to invite you to the granary to talk so that we can tide over the difficulties together." The villagers came empty-handed the whole time, showing their sincerity. Captain Sun frowned and turned back to discuss with everyone. "What do you think? It might be a trap. Once you go in, you'll be caught in a trap. But it could also be that they are sincere in seeking peace. We are armed with guns and are not necessarily afraid of them." Young Mohan asked Celine in a low voice, "What's your opinion?" Celine said simply, "Go." Captain Sun finally made the decision. The minority obeys the majority. "Let's go and take a look." The group followed the villagers cautiously to the granary. On the way, Celine noticed that there was no one at the sentry post, as if the villagers were deliberately showing goodwill. When they arrived at the granary, the villagers greeted them warmly, and some young women brought hot meals to greet them. Wang Gang led everyone into a room, where the table was filled with white rice, stewed chicken, and duck meat, and the aroma was overflowing. Celine's eyes turned slightly cold, and she was secretly alert. The grain in the granary had already been moved by her. So what on earth were these villagers up to? Chapter 78. A charcoal fire was burning in the middle of the long table, and the room was warm as spring. When the members of the grain transport team saw the table full of food, they were a little confused for a moment. Aren't we here for negotiations? They actually prepared such a sumptuous meal. They couldn't help but swallow their saliva, as they hadn't had a decent meal for a long time. The aroma of the food was irresistible. Wang Gang smiled and said, "Don't be polite. The villagers prepared this meal together to show our sincerity. Let's eat and drink first and then have a good talk. We are all from the same country, not an enemy country. Why do we have to fight to the death?" His tone was humble, and his words were full of kindness. "You didn't attack the granary, and we appreciate this friendship." A few nice words made the grain transport team feel much more comfortable, and some even relaxed their guard. However, young Mohan said calmly, "You didn't poison the food or add anything else?" As soon as these words came out, everyone was alert. Wang Gang smiled and said, "We will eat together, don't worry." After that, he and the villagers tried every dish naturally. The aroma of the food became stronger. Captain Sun looked at the villagers who seemed to be indifferent, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Everyone, sit down and eat." Young Mohan sat next to Celine and did not start eating immediately, but washed the tableware with tea. The other people in the grain transport team could no longer hold back and ate the meat without caring about their appearance. Celine took a piece of shredded chicken with chopsticks. Although the taste was ordinary, it was good to have meat to eat under such conditions. While eating, she secretly observed the expressions of the villagers and found nothing unusual. Halfway through the meal, she stood up and said to Wang Gang, "Excuse me, where is the bathroom?" A woman stepped forward enthusiastically and said, "I'll take you there." Along the way, the woman behaved politely and cautiously. After arriving at the bathroom, Celine smiled and said, "You go back first, I'll go back later." But the woman insisted, "You are a distinguished guest. We can't neglect you. I'll wait for you outside the door." Celine looked slightly cold and took advantage of the moment when the woman turned around to quickly attack, knocked her unconscious, and dragged her into the cubicle. She quickly left the bathroom, quietly sneaked into the granary, and put the grain rack back into space. Soon, the empty granary was filled again. After everything was done, she returned to the long table. Everyone was enjoying the meal, and even Captain Sun had a smile on his face. Wang Gang held up several bottles of liquor and enthusiastically filled everyone's cups. "Drink some wine to warm yourself up in this cold weather. If you can't drink well, don't try to force yourself." The men in the grain transport team were not willing to show weakness, and they all raised their glasses. "We can drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk," Celine observed calmly, while Shu Qing whispered to her. Wang Gang proposed to escort the food back to the base for only a small reward, and Captain Sun agreed. Celine narrowed her eyes, but sneered in her heart. Is there really such a good and cheap thing? After 3 rounds of drinking, many people were already flushed and even began to relax their guard. 2 young village women walked towards young Mohan with more wine and said softly, "This wine has been treasured for many years. Would you like to try it?" One of them even tried to get close to him, but young Mohan frowned in disgust and avoided him, saying, "I'm allergic to alcohol, I won't drink it." Another person smiled and advised, "It's okay to drink less. It's hard not to suspect that you have bad intentions when you force me to drink like this," he said coldly. The village woman left in dismay, but the atmosphere became ambiguous because of the drunk team members. At this time, Captain Sun stood up and said, "Thank you for your hospitality. The base will send people to bring food, and you will be hired as escorts. We will leave 5,000 kilograms of food, and you will continue to live in the granary, and everyone will take what they need." Wang Gang's face froze, but he still tried to smile and said, "Of course, it's a pleasure to work with you." Captain Sun suggested going to the granary to check the grain, but Wang Gang quickly dissuaded him. "Everyone has drunk too much. It won't be too late to go tomorrow." The drunk team members all agreed and were even helped away by the villagers, obviously having been overwhelmed by the alcohol. Celine stood up calmly. "Is there a room for me? I want to rest for a while, too." A handsome young villager came over and smiled like a gentleman. "This way, please." Seeing this, young Mohan followed with a cold face. "She is with me." The villager was stunned for a moment, but still smiled. He took the 2 people to the room and left. After locking the door, Celine looked at young Mohan. What did you find? There was no ambush, and they didn't put drugs in the wine. Their purpose was probably to bribe our team members and drag us into the water. He whispered. Celine sneered. They only need to instigate one person to destroy the entire food transport team. The threat to the base can be easily resolved for them. Chapter 79, Rebellion. The man named Wang Gang is much smarter than the previous village chief. Celine opened the window, glanced at the man guarding under the eaves, and then looked away. She turned her head to look at young Mohan. Where are you going to stay tonight? Young Mohan coughed lightly, his eyes flashing. For your safety, I will set up a tent in the house tonight. Don't get me wrong, I don't have any improper thoughts. Celine raised her eyebrows. There's a vacant room next door. You can sleep there. I'll call you if anything happens. Young Mohan's expression was subtle, and he whispered, that man outside doesn't look good no matter how you look at him. I advise you to think it over carefully. Celine was stunned. What do you mean by consider the man outside? Young Mohan was startled and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. He chuckled and turned away. Go to bed early. Celine didn't care, and after closing the curtains, she prepared to take a bath. In the past few days, she could only wipe her body simply at the basketball court, but now she could finally take a comfortable bath. She took out the hot water and bathtub from the space, immersed in the warmth, and felt unprecedented relaxation. After taking a bath, she put away the tub and took out a small piece of cake for a midnight snack. Although the meal tonight was rich, it was just a compromise for her. The next morning, Celine and young Mohan got up early and wandered around the granary. To their surprise, the villagers did not stop them, and even the granary guards were nowhere to be seen. Celine glanced at the full granary and thought to herself, it seems that they have not yet noticed that the grain has returned. At 8 o'clock, the rest of the grain transport team showed up one after another. Celine keenly noticed the uneasiness on their faces, and when Captain Sun announced that the grain would be moved back to the base, their faces became even uglier. Captain Sun, why do we have to go back to the base? Wouldn't it be better for us to stay here? Finally, someone couldn't help but shout out. Another person also stood up and agreed. Yes, these grains are ours. No one can take them away. That's right. We stay. This is our territory. Captain Sun's face darkened. Are you going to rebel? Before he finished speaking, several men drew their guns and pointed them at Captain Sunday. If you force us, we will fight to the end. Then, several more people stood on the side of the mutineers and raised their guns. A man sneered. Can we have a good life back at the base? We have to work so hard there to get a little food. Why don't we just stay here and enjoy life? Captain Sun was furious and asked coldly, do you think the base won't send someone to deal with you? The mutineers shrugged. When they arrive, this place will be deserted. Let them rob an empty warehouse if they can. The rebels turned to young Mohan and the others and said sarcastically, don't hold on any longer. Join us. There's food and drink in the granary, and there are lots of women. Isn't it nice to live a good life? Celine glanced at them calmly and said, it seems that you intend to make eating and drinking enough your ultimate goal. The trader sneered. Don't pretend to be noble. There are 100,000 tons of food here. What can the base give us? We will be exploited when we go back. Captain Sun gritted his teeth and asked, are there any others who want to rebel? Leave now, and don't let me regret bringing you out. After hesitating for a moment, a few more people silently stood on the side of the traders. In the end, only Captain Sun, young Mohan, Celine, and Shu Qing were left in the grain transport team. Captain Sun's eyes were cold. If you choose to rebel, don't even think about returning to the base. A mutineer sneered. Who wants to go back to that shabby place? There is plenty of food and women here. Marrying a wife and having children is the way to live a normal life. Celine watched coldly and whispered to young Mohan. You guessed right, the villagers just want to stir up internal strife and reap the benefits. Their goal has been achieved. Now they're just waiting for us to kill each other. Young Mohan said in a cold tone. Captain Sun turned to look at the remaining 3 people and asked in a deep voice, have you made your decision? Celine nodded, her eyes cold, and she showed no intention of backing down. Chapter 80 renforcement arrive. Celine looked at the situation calmly. She had a Gatling gun in hand and plenty of bullets, which was more than enough to deal with the current situation. Young Mohan glanced at her and chuckled. We must stand on the same front. Captain Sun glared at him and said, it's already this late, and you're still talking nonsense here. Shu Qing said weakly, Captain Sun saved me, so I will never be his enemy. Wang Gang, who was standing at the back, clapped his hands and said to the rebels with a smile, "Welcome to join us. We will take down the 4 of them today, and the 2 women will be yours." Hearing this, the eyes of those rebels instantly became hot, and their gazes fell especially on Celine, whose cold temperament aroused their desire to conquer. Captain Sun sneered. "Wang Gang, I knew you had bad intentions in inviting us here." Wang Gang smugly clicked his tongue twice. "You knew that and still dared to come? Are your brains frozen?" Captain Sun suddenly laughed, and the laughter froze the smile on Wang Gang's face. "What are you laughing at?" "I laugh at you for thinking you are so smart," Captain Sun said coldly. "How could I not think of something you can think of?" After that, he took out a whistle and blew it suddenly. Before everyone could react, more than 100 fully armed Bay soldiers suddenly rushed into the granary. They held weapons in their hands, moved in unison, and were full of momentum. The rebel panicked instantly. What's going on?" Captain Sun explained calmly. "Reinforcements from the base arrived the day before yesterday. We had planned to attack last night, but I didn't expect you to take the initiative to invite us. I just went with the flow and saw what tricks you were going to play." The mutineers were speechless and pale. Someone shouted angrily, "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" Captain Sun sneered. "Tell you? Then how can we catch the traitor?" The mutineers dropped their guns and begged for mercy. "Captain Sun, we were wrong. We will never do it again." Captain Sun shook his head coldly. "It's too late. Betrayal is betrayal. From today on, you are no longer welcome at M-Base." Hearing this, the mutineers' faces turned even paler. In the cold winter, they had nowhere to go after leaving the granary. Without food and shelter, they could barely survive. Captain Sun turned to Wang Gang and said coldly, "Now it's your turn to make a choice." Before Wang Gang could speak, women, children, and the elderly rushed out and apologized repeatedly. "We are in the wrong. Please give us a way out, and we will leave the granary immediately." Wang Gang was about to mention the missing food when he saw soldiers from the base carrying bags of rice out of the granary. He was stunned, then looked at the open door, where there were neatly stacked food racks several meters high. "Ow! How could this happen?" Wang Gang muttered to himself. The villagers were equally stunned, almost suspecting that they were seeing things. The food had disappeared without a trace a few days ago, but now it seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Captain Sun thought they were unwilling to give in, so he snorted coldly, "Don't look at it anymore. These grains are not yours." Finally, the villagers had no choice but to compromise and join in the work. Captain Sun promised to give each of the villagers who helped a bag of rice, and they were satisfied. In the evening, 10 trucks were loaded with food, and Captain Sun gave the order, "Let's go." Someone suggested taking a rest for the night, but Captain Sun shook his head. "The longer the night, the more trouble there is. We can't delay any longer." When the team was on the road, the traitor wanted to follow, but Captain Sun was merciless. "Don't follow, and base doesn't accept traitors." Celine and Yang Mohan were still driving the convoy at the rear, and the convoy was moving slowly on the snow. Celine held the steering wheel with one hand, and with the other hand she tore open a sausage and took a bite, looking relaxed. Chapter 81: Reward Distribution. The journey was relatively smooth. Anyone with a bit of common sense would not come up to Rob. After 5 days, they finally returned to the base. The people at the base already knew that they were going to transport food, so when they saw the truckloads of food being pulled back, they couldn't help but cheer, applaud, and scream. Captain Sun was busy with the handover and didn't care about Celine and Yang Mohan. "Come back in 2 days to exchange for rice." They responded and left. Celine returned to the door of her home and was about to take the key out from the space when the door was opened from the inside. The 4 members of the Wen family stood at the door, looking at her with smiles on their faces. Alex walked up and took a look at her. He was relieved to see that Celine had a rosy complexion and didn't look haggard at all. Her mother pulled her into the house, and their hearts finally settled down. Even though Celine had proved to them how powerful she was, they could not be completely at ease. David went to cut some fruit for her and said, "Eat something first to fill your stomach. I'll go cook for you." After saying that, he hurried into the kitchen. "Did you encounter any trouble on the road? Was anyone robbing you?" Dad asked quickly. Celine didn't tell them about the bear attack. She only told them that the granary was occupied by the villagers and how they finally took the food back. "This is too much. They can't even finish 100,000 tons of rice. It will be wasted if it's not stored properly." Dad has seen a lot of selfish behavior, but he has never seen anything like this. Alex, they are stupid. There are too many people in the base. They can't defend it. Even if they move the food away, as long as they catch one of them, they can get the truth out of him. In the end, won't all their efforts be wasted? Celine noticed a 20-kilogram bag of rice at home and asked curiously, "Is that bag of rice your salary?" Yes, there are still 100 work points left. The Al-Qaeda members have been out looking for supplies these days. There are a lot of things in the supermarket now. Just use your work points card to pay. Alex handed her his work points card. I have 80 work points on my card. You can use it to buy things. Celine smiled and pushed it back. The supermarket stuff isn't as complete as my space, so keep it for yourself. We're not here for the supplies. We're here for the fun of shopping. There are clothes and quilts for sale in the mall at the base. You can go take a look tomorrow. Celine responded casually. She couldn't sit still, so she checked the stock at home. There wasn't much left from when she went out to transport food. She took the meat out of the space, put it in a basin, and placed it outside on the balcony. The freezing weather outside is like a natural refrigerator, so there is no need to worry about the meat going bad. Just as she was about to go back, she suddenly saw a number of ice houses built on an open space not far away. Her mother came out to help her clean the meat. Seeing her looking into the distance without moving, she also looked over there. Those igloos were built by people who had nowhere to live. When it was extremely hot, many people couldn't even afford to live in dormitories and had to set up tents. They went to negotiate with the people at the base, but since they really had no place to live, they suggested that they build igloos to keep out the cold. Celine then remembered that this was the case. They had arrived early, so the houses in the base were not full. Now, with the increase in the number of people, the houses in the base were becoming crowded, and one dormitory was already crowded with more than a dozen people. Apartment buildings like theirs are all full, and there are no extra occupants. Mom continued, a lot of people died in this natural disaster. According to official statistics, there are already 2,000 people killed. When will this day end? It's cold outside, let's go back inside. Natural disasters are not something that humans can intervene in. They can only respond and live their lives well. The family had a sumptuous dinner, which included meat and seafood. After dinner, Celine took a comfortable hot bath. She had spent most of the past 10 days in the car, which was not as comfortable as lying in bed. There is an internet connection in the base. Celine logged into the base's forum and looked at the information on it. Many people vent their dissatisfaction there, cursing the base for not taking on jobs if they don't have the ability, saying that they moved here from far away and don't even have a place to live. Many people responded below, expressing hatred towards people who live in apartment buildings and villa areas. An anonymous user gave Celine an idea. He said, I will burn down their house sooner or later. She frowned and clicked report. At this time, the official of the base finally updated the latest news. The grain transport team has brought back the grain. Starting tomorrow, everyone can come to the supermarket to buy grain. The price of rice is uniform, 5 work points per kilogram, and each person is limited to 1 kilogram per day. The price is not expensive. People working in the base can earn about 20 work points a day, which is enough to buy rice. This news caused a flood of comments, and many people responded to express their gratitude. Thank you for your hard work, members of the grain transport team. Does this mean that we will no longer be short of rice? This is a good base for us to do something. 5 work points are not much, but why can't it be distributed directly to us? Thank you. Isn't the rice from the granary? It belongs to us, ordinary people. Is everything okay upstairs? Do you know how many people are there in the base? If they're given out for free, no one will go to work. How can the base develop? The food will run out someday. The base is still under construction. If everyone goes on strike, we will bear the consequences. For the long term, the base should not be free. Don't even mention that I can't even earn 5 work points a day. A friend of mine can earn 80 work points a day. When he first came here, he couldn't even afford to live in a dormitory. Now he lives in a 2-story board house, and he has gradually purchased quilts and cotton clothes. Fortunately, most people understand the base's approach, and few people complain. Celine also expressed her support in the comments below. The next day after returning, Celine went with the other 2 to collect the payment for transporting grain. Since all the people who went with her had betrayed her, only she, Yang Mohan, and Shu Qing were left, and the settlement was very quick. Captain Sun said, the original promised reward was 100 kilograms of rice, but due to your outstanding performance, the base has discussed and will give you 300 kilograms of rice and 300 work points. This reward is similar to what Celine estimated. These 300 work points alone can buy a lot of rice. Thank you, Captain Sunday. Celine thanked him. She looked around and didn't see young Mohan. Captain Sun seemed to know what she was thinking and said with a smile, young Mohan was called to the research institute. Celine, yeah. Shu Qing arrived a few minutes late, so Captain Sun also increased her compensation. Originally, you joined halfway, so I could only give you 50 kilograms of rice. But since you performed well, the base decided to give you 100 kilograms of rice and 50 work points. Shu Qing didn't expect that he would get a reward. He immediately smiled and thanked repeatedly. Chapter 82, Buying Rice. Shu Qing turned around and saw Celine and her two siblings and greeted them with a smile. Celine and Alex were very cold in their attitude. David felt embarrassed to ignore them, so he nodded slightly. The three siblings loaded 300 kilograms of rice into the car. Celine handed the car keys to Alex and said, I'm going to go to the mall for a walk. You guys go back first. Okay, be safe. Alex smiled gently. Just as Celine was about to leave, Shu Qing called her. Wait a moment. She looked back, her face expressionless. What? I borrowed a pound of rice from you last time. Now that I have rice, I'll return it to you. Shu Qing said quickly. Celine understood and wanted to get the gold bracelet back. Okay. She reached into her pocket, took out the gold bracelet from the space, and handed it to her. Shu Qing asked Captain Sun for a bag and grabbed a few handfuls of rice into it. She weighed it and felt it was not enough. Just as she was about to pour more rice into the bag, Celine said, That's enough. Ah! Shu Qing was stunned for a moment, then paused. Wait a moment. I'll go borrow a scale from Captain Sunday. She quickly ran back and said happily, It's just over a pound. Your estimate is so accurate. After saying that, Shu Qing grabbed a few more handfuls of rice into the bag. The extra ones are my gifts to you. Adding icing on the cake is nothing, but sending timely help is the most memorable. Celine, it's not like I'm helping you out, I just like your bracelet. She mistakenly thought that Shu Qing wanted to buy the bracelet, so she said it was a loan. Shu Qing smiled sheepishly. This bracelet was left to me by my mother. I don't want to sell it. Celine didn't say much and left with the rice that Shu Qing returned. When she came to a place where there was no one, she put the rice into the space, then put her hands in her pockets and left as if nothing had happened. Celine used the 300 work points she had just earned to spend. There was no shortage of rice in the base, and she met many people carrying rice home on the way. When we arrived at the shopping mall on the third floor, which was converted from the canteen, we found that there were quite a few people inside, most of whom were selling cold-proof items. Celine walked into a quilt shop and found that many of the quilts were dirty. Boss, do you have any clean quilts? Someone asked what Celine was thinking. The boss lazily sat on a stool, basking in the sun. Do you think you can still go around getting goods like before? I bought these quilts from outside. The cotton in the quilts can't be washed. You can just make do with it. You wear cotton clothes to sleep anyway. So what's there to be afraid of? Someone muttered. These quilts have a strange smell. I think they were picked up from the community outside. Many people arrived at the base when it was extremely hot, and those who were moving took everything except blankets. So when the extreme cold came, many people ran to the city's residential areas or urban villages to find quilts. Someone went out for half a day and brought back a cart of quilts. Everyone followed suit. Some people couldn't compete with others, so they used their work points to buy from others. By now, there was almost no shortage of quilts. Of course, some people on the forum also reminded people to close the doors and lock their quilts and clothes, because those who did not earn work points would choose to steal. How many work points are there for a quilt? Someone asked the boss. 15 work points. It's too expensive. Can it be cheaper? Boss, you can buy it or not. There are plenty of people who want it anyway. The man didn't know what to say, so he picked a cleaner quilt, paid, and left. Celine looked down upon these dirty quilts, so she went to other shops and found that the clothes sellers were similar to the quilt sellers, and the clothes and pants they sold were either dirty or torn. However, clothes and pants were cheaper than quilts, ranging from 3 to 5 work points, and people came to buy them in an endless stream. What can I do if I don't buy? The production at the base has just started, there is no fabric, and I don't know when I will have clothes to sell. The second floor of the mall sells food. After observing the area, Celine discovered that the items sold there were of a limited variety. They were either multigrain buns or simple snacks. Don't even think about fried food. Everything was boiled. Celine finally bought a bowl of sweet potato soup, which cost her 5 work points. The boss is reluctant to add sugar, so the syrup is only slightly sweet, as if he is afraid that people will taste the sweetness. After leaving the mall, Celine turned and went to the supermarket. There was a queue several dozen meters long outside the supermarket. All of them were buying rice. Anyone who had more than 5 work points came. Since the purchase is limited, the staff is responsible for weighing the rice, and the card reader can identify whether the holder of this card has come to buy rice, so no one could take advantage of the situation. Just then, a woman put her work points card on the machine, and the machine beeped. "You have already swiped the card here, please do not use it again." The staff looked at her grimly. The purchase rules have been posted outside. Each person is limited to 1 kilogram. You have already bought it. Come back tomorrow. The woman was exposed in public and left in shame. The staff shouted to the people in line, "Those who have bought rice today can leave now." The card reader can recognize it. Don't take chances and queue up in vain. Finally, I would like to remind everyone to keep your cards safe and report it lost immediately. More than a dozen people came out of the queue one after another. How greedy! 1 pound of rice is enough for a day, yet you still want to snatch it from us. You shouldn't remind them. Let them freeze for an hour or two, then tell them they can't buy it, and punish them so they behave themselves. I heard that the base brought back more than 100,000 tons of rice. We shouldn't have to worry about food in the next 2 years. The Research Institute is already researching planting. Let's wait for good news. Celine, who happened to witness this scene, walked into the supermarket without stopping. The supplies in the supermarket are much richer, but they are not cheap. There were flour rolls and steamed buns for sale on the shelves, each costing 2 work points, and there were still quite a few left. I guess after doing the math, they found that it was more cost-effective to save the work points to buy rice. Celine has no shortage of work points. She has nearly 800 work points on her card, so there is no need to be frugal. She thought the steamed buns were good, so she bought all 20 of them and 10 steamed buns. There are even half bottles of stuff for sale in the supermarket, which are obviously bought from outside. The remaining quantities of things like peanut oil, rice wine, vinegar, etc. are different, but the prices are not cheap. It's not easy to find these things nowadays, so no one mind those things being other people's leftovers. It's good enough to have them. Celine bought another bag of unopened red dates and salt, then went out to pay. These things cost a total of 90 work points. The most expensive thing was salt, which cost 20 work points per bag. Celine was carrying her things back home and couldn't help but take a few more glances at the igloos as she passed by. The igloos are not big and are rather low. 2 or 3 people live in each igloo, and the door is blocked by a wooden board. Chapter 83, Constant Temperature Shed Developed. Celine returned home and found a lot of people gathered near the apartment building. She heard someone say the word fire. Looking up, they saw black smoke coming out of the building where they lived, gathering on the top floor. Celine didn't dare take the elevator and quickly ran upstairs. When she reached the 14th floor, she found that there was a fire in one of the family's houses, and more than a dozen people were putting out the fire. She went straight up to the 15th floor and only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the one family standing at the stairs looking downstairs. Is everything all right at home? The black smoke outside gathered on the roof of their house, and their heart jumped when they first saw it. It's okay. The people on the 14th floor are the ones on fire, and we don't know the cause yet, Mom explained. Not long after, the fire on the 14th floor was put out and everyone dispersed. Everyone just thought that it was caused by carelessness when using fire and electricity. Nowadays, everyone has some heating equipment at home, and excessive use of circuits can easily burn out. No one took this matter to heart. Celine heard from Yang Mohan again a week later. The official account of the base announced that they will build a constant temperature greenhouse to tightly surround the entire base, so that as long as you don't go out, you won't feel cold. The materials for the constant temperature greenhouse have been prepared, and construction will begin in the next 2 days. This news instantly made the entire base boil. This was good news. The base said that after the constant temperature shed is built, the temperature of the base will be controlled at around 20 degrees, and production will be able to resume soon. I heard that the constant temperature greenhouse was developed by Yang Mohan, a member of the institute. This will really benefit the people of the entire base. Hurry up and build it. I'm going to freeze to death. You don't understand what it feels like to live in an igloo. After the constant temperature shed is built, I can continue to live in a tent. We are waiting for the constant temperature greenhouse to be released. Please don't make us wait too long. Thank you, researchers, for your hard work. When Celine saw the news, she curled her lips unconsciously. He really figured it out. The rest of the Wynn family was also very happy. David said with a smile, I was almost frozen to death every morning when I went to work. Now that we have a constant temperature shed, we can take off our heavy down jackets. I'll go and see if anyone needs help. I'm willing to work for free. Seeing that everyone was looking forward to the constant temperature greenhouse, the base was not vague and started construction after planning the method of adding a cover. Many people rushed to help and united to assist. The officials at the base were deeply moved and distributed dry food and water to everyone who came to help. As a result, more people came to the scene after hearing the news, and the speed of building constant temperature greenhouses was twice as fast as the base expected. The constant temperature shed, which was planned to be built in half a month, was completed in just 1 week. The moment the constant temperature shed was completed, everyone could clearly feel the temperature rising. Half an hour later, someone was so hot that he took off his thick coat. The indoor thermometer detected a temperature of 22 degrees. Of course, the temperature will drop as the snowstorm arrives, and is expected to drop by about 3 degrees. The snow on the ground began to melt into water and float out along the ditches dug in advance. Seeing everyone reveling, the base officials reminded, "It's still snowy outside, so everyone must remember to wear cotton clothes when going out." The overly happy people responded one after another. Celine also felt her body getting hot, so she took off her coat and felt the lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. After staying outside for a while, Celine felt bored and went back. The snow on the roof melted and dripped down continuously. The balcony was covered with messes, and my mother couldn't clean it no matter how many times she mopped it. Dad took out all the buckets in the house to collect water, and this solved the problem. Around 20 degrees is a relatively comfortable temperature. After the snow melted, my mother started growing vegetables on the balcony and the roof. The constant temperature shed is made of transparent material and will not block the sunlight when covered, so there is no problem in growing vegetables. The soil outside has become soft. I'll go shovel some back later. The rooftop is so spacious, it would be a waste if we don't use it. When they booked the top floor, they also bought the rooftop spot, so there's no need to worry about anyone coming up. The whole family supports my mother's idea. It's not that they are short of food, but as long as she is happy, it's fine. With the constant temperature shed, all the igloos melted and people could set up tents on the open space again. As long as they stay at the base, the years are peaceful and harmonious. But once they step out of the base, the biting cold wind, sleet, and other weather conditions will bring them back to reality from their fantasy. The natural disaster has not yet passed, and it is almost impossible to return to previous life. Celine doesn't want to live in a hothouse forever, lest her body won't be able to adapt to going out in the future. She would go out several times a month to look for supplies or to unveil the list. The base would announce what it needed from time to time, and anything that could be found from outside would earn work points. The harder something is to find, the more work points you get. That day, Celine took the vegetable seeds to exchange and met Yang Mohan when she came out of the office building. The man was surrounded by the leaders of the base, who were whispering something to him, while Yang Mohan had a blank expression and occasionally responded. The two met on a narrow road. Yang Mohan stared at her straight and curled his lips lightly. Celine nodded slightly to say hello and then made way for them. Yang Mohan said to those people, "I'll report back to you in a few days. I have something else to do, so I have to go." Several leaders didn't mind Yang Mohan's failure to show up at all and said with a smile, "Okay, let's discuss it another day." Celine left first, and Yang Mohan followed. The two came to the artificial lake. Celine looked at the handsome man and said with a smile, "The constant temperature greenhouse is a success. Congratulations." The man leaned against the guardrail, staring at her leisurely, and scolded her with a smile. "You heartless thing, why didn't you come to see me for so long?" He was too busy the past few days, and he had heard so many words of gratitude so many times that he was almost numb to them. But this person never showed up from beginning to end. "I know you're busy, so I won't bother you." Celine made an excuse guiltily. She is not a proactive person and has never thought about having a deeper connection with anyone. To her, Yang Mohan is just someone she meets on the street and can say hello to. Yang Mohan also knew that she was a cold person, so he didn't force her. Seeing that she was wearing a down jacket, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "Going out?" Celine nodded and said, "Go out and find some supplies to exchange for work points to buy rice." "Where is your home? I'll bring you some rice later." Yang Mohan said, "Why send it to me?" She was puzzled. "There's a lot of rice at home. We can't finish it all, so I'll give you some." I was given 300 kilograms of rice when the base transported food, and another 500 kilograms of rice was given for the constant temperature greenhouse. Adding that to my usual salary, I couldn't finish it all. Celine, keep your voice down. Aren't you afraid of being robbed? Chapter 84 Arson. especially after Yang Mohan finished speaking. A few people happened to pass by and looked over here. The base has sent guards to protect me, so you don't have to worry about your personal safety, Yang Mohan said in a magnetic voice. Celine still refused. We still have a long time to live. You can keep it. I have food. There will be various natural disasters in the future that will challenge the limits of human survival. It is hard to say whether we can grow food, so you can never have too much food. The base is not short of rice for now, but if it fails to grow food, it will sooner or later run out of resources. Seeing that Yang Mohan was always thinking about giving things to others, Celine couldn't stand it anymore. Listen, you must hide the rice you got. It's something that will save your life in the future. After a pause, she continued, if you trust me, I can store it for you. If you need rice, come and ask me for it. Okay, I'll leave 500 kilograms of rice with you first, and you can take it if you need food, Yang Mohan said without any hesitation. Celine. After Yang Mohan returned home, he actually brought her the rice. 5 bags of rice weighing 500 kilograms. The two took the rice upstairs and arrived at Wen's house. When they saw her mother, Yang Mohan greeted her with a gentle smile. Auntie. It was rare for the mother to see her daughter bringing a stranger home, and a man at that, so her eyes gradually became unsatisfied. Mom, this is my friend Yang Mohan. Celine introduced him and pointed at the bags of rice. Just as she was about to explain the whole story, her mother asked quietly, isn't it a betrothal gift? The money from the past is no longer useful. Marrying a wife and other things require supplies. There are not many people as generous as Yang Mohan. Celine's eyelids twitched slightly, but she could really imagine. Mom, they are storing the rice in our house, not a betrothal gift. Mom, you mean the betrothal gift is something else? Celine. Ineffective communication. Yang Mohan coughed lightly, her voice clear and pleasant. Annie, Celine and I are just friends at the moment. If there is any progress, I will definitely come to visit you again. Oh, what a pity. Mom sighed. She was still thinking about pairing them up. It didn't matter if they were fake. The mother did not hide the disappointment in her eyes, and Celine just couldn't bear to watch it. Yang Mohan stayed at home for dinner in the evening. 3 men who had just returned from get-off work saw him and surrounded him. David thought of Celine's attitude towards Shu Qing and how their family didn't like strangers. He immediately frowned and said, don't come if you don't have anything to do. We are all very busy and don't have time to entertain you. These words were said very bluntly, and Yang Mohan looked at Celine in confusion. Celine explained, big brother, second brother, Yang Mohan is my friend. Is it okay for him to be my guest? Little sister, you have changed. Alex's voice was very gentle, and his eyes towards Yang Mohan were unfriendly. Did I? Celine was puzzled. David nodded vigorously. Just as he was about to speak, his mother interrupted him. Guests are guests. Can you be nicer to them? The 2 women in the family rebelled at the same time, and the 3 men in the Wen family were stunned. They looked over together, and when they saw Yang Mohan's enchanting face, they suddenly found a reason. The 3 men of the Wen family felt sour. Were they not good-looking? Why were they suddenly interested in a strange man? Celine and her mother had no idea what they were thinking, so they asked them to sit down and eat. Dad felt even more sad when he saw his wife circling around Yang Mohan, not even looking at him. Alex and David were so angry that their faces turned green when they saw their little sister chatting and laughing with Yang Mohan. Yang Mohan noticed their gazes. These men in the Wen family are not easy to deal with. Since a constant temperature shed was built at the base, the factory has been operating again and many people have found jobs. The apartment building was very quiet during the day, with no sound of activity to be heard. Celine was going to the supermarket to buy some things. After waiting for a long time and the elevator still didn't come up, she simply went downstairs. When passing the 6th floor, a man passed by her. Celine didn't care and was about to walk downstairs when she suddenly smelled something. She paused, turned around, and followed the man. The man came to the staircase on the 15th floor and saw an iron door blocking his way. He shook it vigorously several times. Then he tried to pick the lock, but in vain. The man cursed under his breath and was about to turn around and leave, but when he turned around, he saw Celine leaning against the wall, her beautiful eyes staring at him coldly. The man didn't hear the footsteps at all and didn't know when Celine came up. He was startled. What do you want to do? Celine walked closer, her eyes full of oppression and hostility. I went to the wrong floor. The man's eyes darted around dishonestly. He smiled at Celine and was about to leave. As the two passed each other, the man's face turned fierce, and he threw a bottle of something at Celine. Celine had been on guard against him and quickly dodged to the side. The liquid splashed on the ground, and a pungent smell came from the air. It was gasoline. Seeing that he failed, the man was not willing to give in. He took out a bag of firewood, lit a stick, and threw it onto the gasoline. A big fire instantly broke out on the ground. Taking advantage of Celine's trip, the man hurried downstairs. Celine took out a fire extinguisher, quickly put out the fire, and chased after him. Finally, the man was caught on the 10th floor. "Why did you come here to set fire?" Celine clasped his hands behind his back and asked coldly. The man snorted and turned his head away, unwilling to say it. Celine simply took out a dagger from the space and put it against the man's neck. "Speak." The man saw that Celine was serious and that she would really take action. After a moment of hesitation, he finally confessed, I just feel unbalanced. Why do you live in such a nice house and have no worries about food and clothing, while I have to starve and freeze? Why did you choose me?" Celine stared at him coldly. "If I'm not mistaken, your target last time was also my house. When you saw the iron gate blocking the way, you mistakenly thought that I lived on the 14th floor, so you burned the house there, right?" The man was suddenly speechless. Celine's guess was so accurate. "You'd better tell me the truth, or don't blame me for being merciless," Celine said in a cold tone, and the blade drew a bloody mark on the man's neck. The man felt the pain and was so frightened that his mind became clearer. "I didn't look for you. I was not happy, so I just looked for a random family. You see, I didn't hurt why. Ooh, let's write it off. I won't dare to do it again." Seeing that he was still looking around and talking about other things, Celine sneered and suddenly stabbed him in the head with the dagger. "Ah!" The man screamed in fright, but there was no pain. He opened his eyes tremblingly. The tip of the knife was only a few millimeters away from his forehead, flashing a cold light. Chapter 85, Who is the mastermind behind this? Celine curled her lips in a smile. "I suddenly changed my mind. I can't let you die so easily." She stretched out her jade fingers and rubbed her smooth chin, then said with a cold smile, "If I lock you up and cut you with a knife every day, how many days can you live?" The man was so scared that he peed his pants and his face turned pale. He begged for mercy again and again. "This has nothing to do with me. I was ordered by someone. Every wrong has its perpetrator. Go find the person behind this. You might as well tell the truth," Celine said in a cold tone. "I don't know that man. He came to me out of the blue and asked me to set the fire in exchange for 20 kilograms of rice. I'm a bit cynical, and my life wasn't going as I wanted it to be. I couldn't stand seeing others living better than me, so I agreed." The man was afraid that Celine would suddenly take action, and his thoughts burst out in a trembling voice. "Can you draw? Draw what he looks like." The man shook his head, his face full of fear. "It's useless to say anything. What's the point of keeping you here?" Celine frowned, her eyes cold. The man looked at the knife tip so close to him, sweating all over. He took a small step back cautiously and said, "I can help you lead him out." Celine looked at him expressionlessly. "Tell me about it." The man's mind was working quickly. "That man only gave me 10 kilograms of rice and said that he would bring the remaining 10 kilograms after the matter was completed. Then I will help you take him down. This method is worth a try." She wasn't afraid that he would escape. 5 minutes later, a thick smoke came out from the Wen family's balcony, and flames could be faintly seen through the glass windows. At this time in the Wen family, the mother was responsible for projecting the flames, while Celine used dry ice to create a large amount of smoke to create a lifelike effect. After doing all this, Celine looked at the man and said, "Now you can go back and report." Chung Yuan was stunned. Is this even possible? He didn't dare to delay and turned away. Celine disguised herself and followed him from a distance, keeping an eye out for any suspicious people around. Chung Yuan lived in the tent area. He returned to his home and waited quietly. He knew that Celine was lying in ambush not far away and that she could probably see his every move clearly, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Celine sat on the branch of a tree, her figure completely hidden by the layers of leaves. But she had an excellent perspective and could see the entire tent area. Half an hour later, a thin man wearing a baseball cap with a very low brim appeared in front of Chung Yuan's tent. The mastermind behind the scenes appears. The man did not go into the tent, but just handed Chung Yuan a bag of rice outside. But Chung Yuan had no intention of arresting anyone. Celine jumped down from the tree, walked over quickly, and held down the man who was about to leave. "Don't move." Seeing this, Chung Yuan quickly explained, "He was not the one who ordered me to do this. I'm just a delivery man. What's up?" The man struggled hard. Celine. He let her go, and the man glared at her and ran away quickly. Chung Yuan looked at her weakly. Well, the plan seems to have failed, but I still have a trick. How about this? Next time I see that person, I will write down where he lives, and you can go to his house to catch him. Celine could see that the man was very cunning and would not show up easily. The person who contacted Chung Yuan might not be the real person. You'd better behave yourself. If you let me know that you hired someone to trick me, don't even think about leaving the base alive. Chung Yuan quickly assured. I dare not. As soon as Celine arrived downstairs of her house, she ran into the Wen family, father and son, who had hurried back. There's a fire at home. Go home quickly. Dad was so anxious that he said to her hurriedly. Celine quickly stopped them. There's no fire in the house. That's the smoke from the dry ice. The father and his two sons subconsciously stopped, and Celine continued to explain, My mother and I made that together, don't worry. Dad breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that. He was about to ask the reason, but then he shut up again when he saw someone passing by. When they returned home, they saw their mother sitting on the sofa in good health, and their hearts finally settled down. The dry ice smoke on the balcony was almost gone, and my father asked in confusion, What's going on? Celine told the whole story. Our family was targeted. The mastermind was hiding very deeply and was very cautious. The clues are currently interrupted, so we can only take a long-term view. As long as that person is still targeting them, they will definitely make another move. Why did that person do this to them? Revenge? Or some other purpose? David sighed. Yesterday, we watched them put out the fire for a long time, but we turned out to be their target. The mother said worriedly, If they want revenge, you must be careful when you go out. Or you could bring a gun with you. Just don't let them know that we have a gun. The base does not allow people to carry guns for the sake of ease of management. They can understand that, and as long as they don't take out their guns, the people in the base will not search every household. Celine agreed. That's right, having a gun is the best way to go. You should carry a pistol with you, and be careful to avoid people. The Wen family, father and son, agreed. Half a month later, another good news came from the base. The vegetables they planted sprouted. The soil outside the base is still frozen, and no crops can be grown, but it is possible inside the base. After the constant temperature greenhouse was built, the base turned over the soil in the ground and replanted the vegetable seeds. Now all the seeds have taken root and are growing well. This news made everyone in the base very excited. Only by growing vegetables could they have hope for the future. Knowing that the base is not short of supplies, they have the motivation to earn work points. These are not just a number, but real food. The base has also opened up a piece of land specifically for raising chickens and ducks. There are currently hundreds of chicks and ducklings, and people at the base will be able to eat eggs in the future. The base is getting better and better, and there are fewer people causing trouble, because as long as you are diligent, you will never have to worry about food. The vegetables that my mother planted on the roof had grown about 10 centimeters. She was so excited that she watered them every day. It was too cold outside the base, so those who didn't want to go out could only find fun on their own. Some people danced square dance in open areas. As time went by, more and more people joined in, and there were also many onlookers, making it very lively. Early that morning, Celine got up on time, opened the curtains, and was stunned the next second. It was dark outside. She thought she had gotten up early, so she picked up her phone and checked the time. 8 o'clock in the morning. I looked outside again, and it was gray, just like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. How so? Could it be that the smog has arrived early? She opened the door and walked in. Mom and Dad were also on the balcony, looking outside. When will this fog clear? The weather has been a little weird lately. Let's wait until the sun comes out to see if it gets better, said Dad. Chapter 86 Haze. A morning passed, and the fog still did not disappear. It was gray outside, and visibility was very low. The base's forum exploded again. There's a constant temperature shed inside the base, so you can barely see things. Outside the base, that guy is like murky water. You can't see anything. I just came back from outside the base. Several cars have hit people. Even with the headlights on, you can't see them. I suggest you don't go out recently. It's not much better inside the base. Crime can easily breed in places that are out of sight. Everyone must keep an eye on their belongings and be wary of people within half a meter of them. Don't mention it. The bun I put in my pocket was stolen. This is the first time someone has stolen anything since I came to the base. Dude, you're much luckier than me. I was robbed today, and my hand was injured. I couldn't see the person after I chased him a few meters away. I hope the Research Institute can quickly develop something to deal with the smog. If it continues like this, there will be a big mess. The comments on the entire forum are full of misery and complaints. The base had no immediate solution because they didn't know where the smog came from. There was absolutely no warning, as if it appeared out of nowhere. I can only advise everyone to protect themselves. Try not to go out, wear masks, etc. For safety reasons, driving is strictly prohibited in the base. One day, Celine went to the supermarket to buy things. She could feel someone following her along the way. She looked back and only saw a vague shadow. As soon as I walked to the door of the supermarket, I heard a man shouting, "Robbery!" The person who was robbed kept shouting and chasing, but in the end he couldn't catch up with the person and had no idea which direction the person ran in. Under the cover of thick fog, even the robber's appearance could not be seen clearly. Suddenly, a pair of hands came up on Celine's shoulders. She looked stern and took action quickly. The man immediately retracted his hand and said quickly, "It's me." Hearing the familiar voice, Celine looked up and saw young Mohan taking off his mask, revealing his superbly handsome face. He was about to speak, but then turned his head and coughed twice and had to put on his mask again. "Are you okay?" Celine asked. Young Mohan shook his head and said, "It's okay, just put on a mask." The two walked into the supermarket side by side. There was a curtain at the entrance of the supermarket to block the fog outside, so the view inside was much clearer. Recently, the base is trying every possible way to contact bases outside to learn how others deal with smog. There may be progress in the near future. Young Mohan picked up a pack of tissues and put it in the cart, then explained to the woman beside him. "It's useless. The smog this time is different from the one caused by the environment. It can't be eradicated. The smog will not disappear until half a year later." Young Mohan was silent for a moment. "The weather is bad, and the vegetables that have just grown are ruined again." Celine was speechless. Everyone had just been looking forward to a better life, but a smog suddenly came and burst the bubble of their beautiful dreams. People in the base are very pessimistic now. They don't even trust the base's food reserves. They rob whatever they can just to store more supplies to survive. Some people who have made enemies on weekdays are now seeking revenge. Many murders have already occurred. When young Mohan buys things, he doesn't look at the price or what they are. He just puts whatever he likes in the cart. Before long, half of the cart is filled with it. Celine bought a bottle of rice wine and 2 toothbrushes and said, "The most dangerous people right now are pessimistic people. Some people are pessimistic only to themselves, while others will vent their anger on others." As soon as he finished speaking, a scream was heard in the supermarket. Everyone subconsciously looked over and saw a man holding a kitchen knife, slashing people like a madman. Those who ran slowly were injured by him. The supermarket security guard came in with a long stick and said, "Put down the knife. What can I do if I don't let you go? It's the end of the world anyway, and no one can survive. Why don't we die together? You'll have a companion on your journey to the underworld. You have no right to decide other people's lives. If you want to die, go ahead and die. Put down your weapons and surrender. Don't hurt anyone." The man with the knife simply wouldn't listen. The more he tried to persuade her, the crazier he became, and his entire face became distorted. The man looked around for a target, stepped back, and grabbed something at hand and threw it at the security guard. Turning around a shelf, he saw young Mohan and Celine standing not far away, and he rushed over. A security guard yelled, "Get out of the way, that guy is crazy." The two of them stood there calmly, and when the man was about to approach, young Mohan kicked the shopping cart out, hitting the man's stomach hard. The knife in the man's hand fell to the ground, and he couldn't stand steadily. Young Mohan walked over and hit him on the chin with his elbow. It was easy to subdue the man in just a few moves. Young Mohan patted the non-existent dust in his hands and said teasingly, "The example has appeared." "Celine." The man was tied up and taken away by the security guards, yelling as he walked, "Life is so painful. Why don't you die together? If you don't dare to do it, I will help you." A man watching the scene spat, "Bah, if you want to die, don't drag others into it. I want to live to be 100 years old." Because of this incident, the people in the supermarket dispersed at once, and when the two went out to check out, there was no one in line. After leaving the supermarket, young Mohan put several things into Selena's bag. "I bought too much. It's heavy to carry. Can you help me share it?" Celine said helplessly, "I'm not as poor as you think. I still have money to buy things. There is no need to find ways to subsidize her." "I know." Young Mohan listened carefully and said with a smile, "Take it back." She said it in vain. Unable to refuse the kind offer, Celine carried 2 large bags home. Walking into the gray fog, she put the things into the space. Not far behind her, the two men who had finally caught up with her were stunned when they saw that she had nothing in her hands. They had clearly seen her carrying 2 bags just now. How come they were gone? Are they dazzled? Brother, someone must have intercepted us. One of the men said firmly. Shit, we were only half a second late. Forget it. Let's find another person to do it, preferably a woman who comes out alone. Do you want? The two men laughed. Their voices were not low, and Celine could hear their conversation clearly. With the cover of smog, can these people's dirty hearts no longer be hidden? Celine had just walked halfway when she noticed many eyes on her. Miss, please wait a moment. A man walked over from the side. Celine glanced at him and asked calmly, What's the matter? Don't get me wrong. I just want to remind you that it's dangerous for a girl to be alone. You must be accompanied by your family next time. The man reminded, Are there still good people now? Celine doesn't believe it. Chapter 87. Celine was caught. Thanks for the reminder. Celine didn't know whether this person was kind or had other intentions, so she continued walking forward after saying that. The man was still following her, and Celine looked back unhappily. It's not safe for you as a girl. My house happens to be in front, and I have a flashlight. I can give you a ride. The man explained quickly. Celine stared at him suspiciously for a few seconds. She didn't know what she was thinking of, and the corners of her mouth curved up in an imperceptible arc. Really? You're such a good person. Well, it's just a piece of cake. There have been various unstable factors in the base recently. I don't want the base to be in chaos. I can only help as many people in need as possible to reduce the burden on the base. The man kept talking, and Celine would occasionally chime in. There was a section of street light in the base that was broken, and it was pitch black all around with no sight at all. Many people only go out every few days and don't even know that the street lights are broken. How dangerous it is without a flashlight. The man's flashlight was dim and flickered from time to time, as if it was running out of battery. Celine walked in front, and the man was behind with a flashlight. There were some footsteps around. Suddenly, the flashlight went out. It seems like there's no electricity, the man said in annoyance. Celine was about to speak when someone suddenly covered her mouth and nose with a piece of cloth. Her body went limp and she slowly fell down. Take the person away. The man leading the way changed his expression. We got another one. You're really good. Who made these women so stupid? They believed everything I said and had no guard at all. It's obvious that they have been in a stable and peaceful environment for a long time. After an unknown amount of time, Celine was thrown to the ground and she slowly opened her eyes. The two men who had brought her here were locking the door and leaving. Suddenly, she heard a faint sobbing sound behind her and turned to look. A dozen girls huddled together in a dark corner. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't have noticed them. Were you captured as well? Celine approached them curiously. She felt that there was something wrong with the man from the beginning, and after thinking it over, she decided to see what tricks they were playing. She pretended to faint and found that they took her out of the base and sent her to this abandoned house. A girl replied weakly, Yes, we have all been locked up here for about a week. What do those people want to do? Celine asked puzzledly. I don't know. They brought us here and then left, giving us 1 meal a day. A few days ago, one of our girls was arrested and never came back. Celine pursed her lips. So many women were captured, either for those things or to be used for exchange. She wanted to see who was behind it. Was she caught by chance? Or was she the target of the attack? Celine sat down in a corner calmly, then took out a compressed biscuit from her pocket and ate it slowly. At this moment, the sound of swallowing saliva was heard from the opposite corner. She noticed their longing looks, but ignored them. After finishing the compressed biscuits, she turned away from them and took out a glass of milk to quench her thirst. There was nothing to do, just sitting there. So Celine leaned against the wall and closed her eyes to rest. The girls who were captured together. Why is Celine so calm? They are almost scared to death now. However, seeing that Celine didn't get along with them, they had some dark thoughts in their minds. When those people came to arrest people, Celine would be the first one to be taken away, and they would be safe temporarily. People are selfish. They also want to live. A dozen girls tacitly moved away from Celine. 3 hours later, the sound of a door opening was heard at the door. The girls huddled together again like frightened birds. A girl with her hands tied was pushed in. They were relieved when they saw the men close the door again and did not take anyone out. Celine opened her eyes in the dim light. She had good eyesight, so she looked up at the man. Shu Qing, who was captured, also saw her, and a look of joy flashed in his eyes the next second. Celine? She walked toward Celine and sat down next to her with difficulty, as her hands were tied and she had difficulty moving. Celine nodded at her to show her greeting. Shu Qing knew that she had a cold personality, so he didn't disturb her too much and just sat quietly beside her. How were you caught? After a while, Celine's voice suddenly sounded. Shu Qing quickly looked towards her, somewhat surprised that Celine would actually take the initiative to talk to her. I went to the office building to exchange supplies and was ambushed by them on the way back. They outnumbered me and I couldn't defeat them. You should be quite skilled. So how come you were caught? Shu Qing was simply curious. Celine, it's okay for now. Shu Qing nodded and muttered. The base is full of fog and we can't see clearly. No wonder they succeed so many times. At this moment, the sound of the door opening was heard again, and two men walked in. They looked around the room and saw the girls in the corner lowering their heads and trying to hide inside. At this moment, a man saw Celine and quickly walked up to her and pulled her up from the ground. Take her away. The other man looked at Celine and Shu Qing's faces for a moment, as if comparing something. After a while, he took Shu Qing away as well. Celine and Shu Qing were taken to a room, where they saw a man sitting in the middle, smoking a cigarette with every puff in his mouth. The smell of smoke was very pungent. Wang Daji. Seeing the man, Celine raised her eyebrows in surprise. You didn't expect that we would meet again, Wang Daji said, glancing at Shu Qing. Why did you bring her here? One of the men explained. These two were captured today. We were not sure which one was the one you wanted, so we brought them both here. Wang Daji ignored Shu Qing and walked forward, circling Celine. Hand over the supplies you have stored. Celine raised her eyebrows. She wasn't surprised that Wang Daji knew she had supplies. He used to hang out with Tina, so it was probably Tina who told him. Before she could say anything, Wang Daji said viciously, Tina once told me that you hid a lot of supplies. Tell me, where did you hide them? Wang Daji didn't even know that she had space. It seems that Tina has some reservations about him. You've been watching me in the dark for so long. Don't you know whether I have any supplies? Celine raised a mocking smile. Chung Yuan was sent by you, right? She thought the person behind him would hide for a long time, but he jumped out so quickly. Wang Daji did not deny it. He sent Chung Yuan to burn down the Wen family's house, just to find out how many things Celine had hidden in the house. Chapter 88, Where are the supplies hidden? Celine was right about one thing. Ever since he learned from Tina that she had a lot of supplies, he had been secretly keeping an eye on the Wen family. After observation, he found something wrong. The food the Wen family took home was pitifully little. How did they survive? Unless their house was full of food and they had no worries about food, he could not calm down whenever he thought of it. The stairs were surrounded by an iron gate, and he had no way of getting close. In addition to having a vengeful mentality, Chung Yuan was also an expert in lockpicking. He simply used threats and inducements to force him to find a way to burn down the Wen family. Afterwards, he indeed saw the Wen family's house on fire downstairs. Fortunately, he was cautious enough and did not show up from beginning to end. He finally realized that it was a setup. He couldn't bear it any longer. Instead of trying to break the door, he decided to capture Celine and threaten her to hand over the supplies. Why did you capture those girls? Celine asked calmly, without any panic on her face. I can't stay in the base any longer. I want to take people out to create a shelter. If there are men, there must be women. Now all we need is supplies. Wang Daji looked at her coldly. Where are your supplies hidden? Celine looked at his ferocious face and asked curiously, Tina, tell you how much supplies I have? She is sure that you have hundreds of millions of supplies, and your house is too small to hold them all. So, you hide the supplies outside, right? As long as you tell me the specific location, I will let you leave alive. Wang Daji asked with a crazy expression. You've gone crazy, immersed in your own dreams and unable to extricate yourself, just like some people who fantasize about becoming rich overnight without putting in any work. Celine looked at him calmly. A normal person's first reaction to hearing this would be that this news is fake, but you firmly believe it. Celine's calmness and Wang Daji's madness were like two extremes. Wang Daji's face turned green as he grabbed her collar and said, Impossible. Tina wouldn't lie to me. You don't have to quibble anymore. Can you believe what Tina said? No wonder you two can get together. Wang Daji. Celine spoke with such certainty that Wang Daji began to waver for the first time. She may have exaggerated, but you must have hidden the supplies. You have no choice but to hand them over if you don't want to. Wang Daji laughed sinisterly. I'll ask you again, where are the supplies? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Celine raised her eyelids, looking at him as if he were an idiot. Wang Daji's face turned pale and blue. Take her away and beat her until she tells the truth. Also, notify her parents to bring supplies in exchange. The two men immediately walked toward Celine. Her eyes suddenly turned cold, and when the men were about to touch her, she kicked one of them away. Before the other man could react, Celine kicked him on the knee. He fell to his knees and was kicked over by Celine the next second. Wang Daji immediately shouted to the outside of the door, "Someone come!" There were footsteps outside the door, and a dozen thugs rushed in, with only knives and sticks in their hands. It's much easier without a gun. Celine reached in her pocket and actually took out a pistol from the space. She pointed the gun at Wang Daji and said, "Tell them to put down their weapons." Wang Daji panicked and raised his hands in surrender. Don't shoot. Let's talk it over. We can discuss it." When Celine turned to look at the thugs, Wang Daji rushed forward and tried to grab Celine's gun. "Give it to me." Wang Daji grabbed the gun in her hand tightly. The man was very strong, and the gun was about to be snatched away. Celine sneered and gently pulled the trigger. Bang! Wang Daji's fierce movement stopped. There was a bloody hole on his body, and he fell down with his eyes wide open. Celine clicked her tongue. "Is that all you can do?" Upon seeing this, the thugs dropped their weapons and rushed out, fearing that they would be spotted by Celine if they were a second late. Celine was too lazy to chase them. Just as she was about to leave, she saw Shu Qing huddled in a corner with his head in his hands. She shouted, "Let's go." Shu Qing seemed to have just realized it, and he crawled to catch up with her. "Wait for me. Don't leave me here alone." Celine frowned and walked forward, while Shu Qing hurriedly trotted over. Arriving at the room where the girls were held, Celine kicked the door open, glanced at them, and turned away. Shu Qing, who was following her, saw this and shouted, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and leave." The girls finally reacted and ran out in a rush. They looked around and didn't see those brutal thugs, so they ran away in a hurry. Arriving at the door of the abandoned house, Celine pointed them to a path. That's the way back to the base. The girls immediately ran in the direction she pointed. Shu Qing followed them, and after running a few steps, she found that Celine was still standing there, with no intention of leaving. She asked in confusion, "Aren't you leaving? I have something else to do." Celine said. Shu Qing bit her lip, whispered thank you, and left. When their figures disappeared, Celine returned to the abandoned room. It is obvious that Wang Daji has been here for more than a day or two. He was able to gather so many people at the base, so he must have a lot of supplies. Those thugs ran faster than anyone else, and no one even remembered about the supplies. Celine saw a room that was locked, so she walked over and violently kicked the door open. The place was filled with supplies. There were more than 30 bags of rice, 2 sacks of dried noodles, 3 boxes of instant noodles, 5 boxes of instant noodles, 1 box of mung bean cakes, 2 bags of sugar, 10 bottles of soy sauce, 50 bags of salt, 3 boxes of various spicy sausages, more than 10 boxes of cigarettes and alcohol, 6 bottles of detergent. Celine collected all the supplies, so this trip didn't end empty-handed. After collecting the supplies, she walked out of the yard and inadvertently saw a small red car, which she also collected. Half an hour later, the thugs who had escaped came back quietly. They listened to the noise outside and made sure that there was no one inside before they walked in with peace of mind. Hurry up and take as much supplies as you can. Wang Daji usually tries to be stingy with us, but in the end, it still ends up in our hands. Several men walked towards the warehouse, but were dumbfounded the next second. They saw that the door of the warehouse was wide open and it was empty, without even a grain of rice left for them. This what's going on? Could it be that Wang Daji is trying to scare us? He doesn't have any supplies at all, a man said angrily. Impossible. I clearly saw a full room last time. Wang Daji must have moved to another place. Let's go look for him again. A group of people searched the house inside and outside, but found nothing, and a deep sense of loss filled their hearts. Don't look for it anymore. I think we should go back to the base. I thought I would have a good life following Wang Daji, but now everything is gone. Chapter 89 Giant Rat. Celine returned home and took out the supplies she had collected today. Her mother saw her taking out boxes of things and asked in confusion, "What are you doing?" "We got the ill-gotten gains from today's robbery, so let's eat something good today." Celine also took out the beef. "You went out today?" Mom said as she packed up the things she had taken out. "I went downstairs today and heard that many girls in the base were missing. I don't know if it's true or not." Celine has the most say in this matter. Is it true? Did you encounter them, chase them away, and take their supplies? Asked the mother. Celine had to admit that her mother's ability to speculate was very strong. She nodded slightly. It was Wang Daji who did it. He was recruiting soldiers in the base and was going to go out and build a shelter. He couldn't recruit women, so he could only use despicable means to kidnap people. Of course, I was also his target. His purpose was to get the supplies in my space. But from what I heard from Wang Daji, Tina didn't tell him that I had a space. She only said that I hid a lot of supplies. In the end, Wang Daji was killed by me, and their warehouse was also emptied by me. The mother said worriedly, I don't know how much Tina has revealed. What if someone shows up to target you next time? Celine chuckled, then eat peanuts. But she also thought about this problem seriously. She felt that Tina would not tell anyone that she had the space. Tina had her eyes on the supplies. If she told anyone, it would mean that more people would compete with her for the space. She should not be that stupid. But these things are hard to say for sure. There is nothing absolute in the world. You can only be more careful. In the evening, David cooked stir-fried beef and tomato beef brisket, and the aroma filled the air. Celine ate 2 full bowls of rice. The family was laughing and chatting happily, which was rare in the end times. In the evening, Celine took out an ice cream and ate it leisurely. After having the constant temperature tent, she put away the electric blanket on the bed as she didn't need it at all. Sometimes when it's hot, we have to turn on the air conditioner for cooling. If there were no haze, this might be the most comfortable state. It is foggy even during the day now, and inhaling too much fog will cause coughing, so almost everyone in the base wears a mask. Currently, the top leaders of the base are discussing how to get rid of smog. Many people have placed their hopes on the personnel of the institute, and they started cursing when they saw no results. Celine then looked through the forum, and the comments there made people want to hit someone, especially young Mohan, who was scolded particularly badly. What are those useless people in the research institute doing? Why haven't they come up with a solution after so long? Is there any progress? Can you report the progress? That's right. Don't just take the supplies and not do any work. This way I can also be a researcher. Anyway, I just can't figure it out. Not that I haven't done anything. Isn't young Mohan very powerful? He used to brag that he was the youngest scientist and professor, but now he can't research anything and is wasting the food in the base. He is so young and good-looking. I wonder how he got such a good job. I guess he didn't invent the constant temperature greenhouse. He has someone above him who is protecting him and deliberately giving him the credit. There are women in the top management of the base, or rather, the wives of the top management are all women. Anyone who understands what this means will understand. Just tell him he can sell it. After seeing these comments filled with foul language, Celine immediately reported them. After she had reported almost everything, she refreshed the page and found that all the comments were gone. Is the base system so powerful? Delete it as you say. Without those comments, Celine felt much better. She didn't know what was wrong with her, but she couldn't bear to see young Mohan being scolded, and those comments were irritating. The person behind the scenes was very dissatisfied when he saw that the post had been deleted. He was about to continue posting when he suddenly discovered that his phone could not connect to the internet. The next day, news of the signal interruption spread throughout the base. The staff at the base also confirmed this. Currently, the mobile phone cannot connect to the internet and will not be able to log into the forum in the future. Many people were dumbfounded. Although other mobile phone apps had long been unusable, the base's forum barely provided them with a bit of fun, and some people encouraged each other on it. Now that they could no longer post comments, many people felt a deep sense of loss. From that day on, life at the base became dull and boring, with numerous crimes occurring under the heavy fog. Even if the base has its own guards, it is still hard to defend against them. Some people stab others and run away, and they cannot be caught at all. The unsafe factors in the base are increasing, and it is urgent to solve these problems. To this end, the base set up guard booths on the roadside, one every 2 meters, and the guards were equipped with guns. The base also spread the word that if another stabbing incident occurred, the guards nearby would open fire immediately. With the base's drastic measures, the dark forces were finally suppressed. Celine is not afraid that someone will suddenly attack her. Almost everyone who has this idea has been dealt with by her, but this is not a solution. For the first time, she thought about leaving the base. There are 26 bases in the country. She has supplies and can go to other bases to survive. Maybe she will leave when the fog clears. Half a month later, Celine was walking in the fog. She had just come out from young Mohan's place and asked him about the movements of the base. He has access to high-level people in the base and has much more complete information than she does. Just then, bursts of screams suddenly came from the front. Run! There are rats coming. That's a cat, right? How can there be such a big mouse? I'm not mistaken. It's a mouse that's bigger than a cat, said Nipost. She heard people gasping for breath beside her, and someone shouted at her, "There's a giant rat ahead. Don't go over there." Hearing this, Celine's face became solemn. The appearance of the giant rat meant that the animal had mutated. There was a rustling sound, and something was crawling on the ground. Celine took out a flashlight and shone it around. Not far away, 3 mice as big as cats were biting things everywhere. A man was entangled by them, and he shouted in fear, "Help! Help me!" Everyone was busy escaping, and no one paid any attention to him, but luckily the guard on duty arrived in time, and he quickly fired. The first shot was not accurate, and it angered the 3 mice, which pounced on the man and bit his face. The man screamed, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get it off. The guard hesitated whether to shoot or not. If he shot, the man would not survive. Seeing that the man was about to be bitten to death, the guard finally opened fire, and the bullet passed through the giant rat and hit the man. The 3 giant rats were killed, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, they were filled with infinite fear. Chapter 90. Attacked by rats in the middle of the night. These rats are obviously mutated. Not only do they bite people to death, but they also eat human flesh. The man who was entangled by the rat had been bitten beyond recognition. It was extremely horrible. When everyone saw this scene, they felt a chill, and those who could not withstand it vomited. Celine frowned and walked quickly back home. Before long, news of mutant animals appearing in the base spread to every corner. The base's loud broadcast also asked everyone to close doors and windows and keep weapons at hand as much as possible. No one knows how many giant rats there are. Like this time, the rats appeared suddenly, and those rats were not only not afraid of humans, but also very ferocious. Celine went back home and reinforced everything. Her mother didn't see how big the mice were, so she asked curiously, "Are those mice really as big as cats? Are they fast? Will they attack people? Those rats eat human flesh. What do you think?" Celine smiled and suddenly thought of something. Mutated rats have appeared. Will there be other things in the future, such as cockroaches, ants, etc.? When the mother thought of those enlarged animals, her scalp suddenly went numb, and she prayed in her heart that they would never appear. This was also what everyone thought. Because of the appearance of mutant rats, living in tents was no longer safe. It just so happened that everyone had earned some work points during this period, so they all squeezed into the dormitory. Some people used to complain about the strong smell in the dormitory, but now, as long as they can save their lives, they don't care about these things at all. Just when people were panicking and united to prepare for battle, the giant rats did not appear. Another week passed, and still no mutated animals appeared, which made many people relax their vigilance. There aren't so many mutant rats and animals. I think you're just scared. That's right. If there was any, it would have appeared long ago. The crisis has passed. We should do what we need to do. The base is making a fuss out of nothing. The guards have guns. If a giant rat appears, just shoot. I heard that it seems that there are too few bullets. They can't be used easily unless it is absolutely necessary. The next time a giant rat appears, we can only use a mousetrap. Everyone, please be careful when you walk, especially because there are many mousetraps installed in the corners. If you get caught, your legs will be broken. I'm just asking, can giant rats be eaten? They're so fat. If you catch one, you can eat it for several meals. Brother, try it next time. If you can eat it, you will be the warrior of the whole base. I don't think it's a big problem. I've eaten roasted rat before, and it tasted pretty good. No matter how noisy the people in the base are, the base still requires people to remain vigilant every day and not underestimate the giant rats. That night, Celine was sleeping soundly when she suddenly heard a squeaking sound outside. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked up, her scalp numbing instantly. She saw 5 giant rats crawling on the closed window. They were gnawing at the glass windows. Celine took out a flashlight and shone it over there, and the mice ran away. As soon as she opened the door and walked out, she saw that her parents and 2 brothers were awake. I heard the sound of mice. Several people said in unison. Just as he finished speaking, there was a sound of a rat climbing on the door, and it was quite noisy. Fortunately, the door was made of iron, which kept the rats out. In the middle of the night, the entire base was in an uproar, with all kinds of banging sounds and angry curses coming one after another. From time to time, there were screams, not to mention those far away. Just in their building, there was a lot of noise from people jumping up and down. The Wynn family sat in the living room, and as long as they didn't open the door or the window, the mice couldn't get in. The base was restless the entire night, and the rats only disappeared at dawn. No one knew where the mouse came from, and Celine waited until the mouse was gone before going out to open the door. I saw that the iron gate was covered with bite marks, and some places had been bitten very thin. If it were bitten for a few more nights, the iron gate would not be able to be saved. The iron door they installed at the entrance of the stairs was also covered with scars. But fortunately, the iron of this door was thick enough, so there were only marks on it, but no damage. Celine frowned. This was not a solution. She took out the electric fence from the space and explained, "Those rats can get into any hole. I'm worried that the windows and iron doors will be damaged by them sooner or later. I'd better install the electric fence as insurance." This was a solution she had just thought of. The Wynn family also thought this was a good idea, so they each took over the power grid from Celine and started working. Electric fences are installed outside the windows of each room, as well as the iron doors outside. Celine tried to turn on the power, and current immediately appeared in the power grid. She nodded with satisfaction. When there are no mice during the day, they will turn off the electricity and turn it on again at night when they go to bed. With these electric fences, we don't have to worry about any number of rats coming. Celine thought of young Mohan and wondered how he was doing. She simply went over there and happened to see young Mohan just coming back from outside. Celine noticed that there were some dark circles under his eyelids, probably because the mice kept him awake last night. Seeing her coming over, young Mohan smiled and asked in a magnetic voice, "Why are you here? Did a mouse get into your house last night?" Celine shook her head. "No, the doors and windows are pretty solid." Young Mohan said, "I have glue and lubricant here. You can apply it on the doors and windows. It can provide some protection. If you need it, I'll get it for you." "No need." Celine held up the bag in her hand. "I brought some electrical grids. You can install them on the doors and windows of your house. But your villa is so big that I guess the grid is not enough. Look, this is the bad thing about living in a villa. It's a 3-story small villa with more than 10 doors and windows, and there is no electricity grid. I'll just seal up the other doors and windows." Young Mohan seemed to understand her thoughts and smiled. "If it doesn't work, I'll get a set of power equipment." There are always more solutions than problems. Seeing that he knew what was going on, Celine felt relieved and was about to leave. Young Mohan said solemnly, "Last night the granary at the base was attacked by rats." Celine's heart tightened. "Did the mice eat all the food?" "No, only 1/3 of it was eaten." "That's quite a lot." Celine felt distressed when she heard this. "Where does the base keep its food now?" "They reinforced the warehouse again." "No, it's better to move the food away," Celine said. She always felt that it was unsafe to store food in a warehouse. "Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's better to separate the food." Young Mohan pondered for a moment and said, "I'll go talk to the higher-ups at the base." Transferring food is a huge project, and people may not listen to him, but what Celine said makes sense. Okay, this is all Celine could remind him of. Chapter 91 Holstedt hat. After Celine left, young Mohan immediately went to find the base's management and informed them of the idea of transferring the food. The base commander convened a high-level meeting, and there was constant discussion. The base has been attacked by rats. As long as we take good precautions, it doesn't matter where we put it. There's no need to move it. The entire grain depot has tens of thousands of tons of grain, but there is no suitable silo to store it, and it is also very troublesome to operate. Instead of wasting manpower on transporting the grain, it would be better to send more people to guard the granary and shoot the rats when they appear. Putting the food separately will require more manpower, so I suggest not moving it. Young Mohan frowned and continued to explain. Those rats already know that there is food in the granary. They will go there again next time, and it may even attract more rats. Base commander, I think it is safer to move them all. Others were unhappy. That's easy for you to say. Where should we put tens of thousands of tons of rice if we abandon the granary we have built? Your idea is good, but I don't think it's necessary. The rats have mutated, but humans can still eliminate them. We are their natural enemies. If mutant rat meat is edible, those people who haven't eaten meat for a long time will be able to transform into wolves immediately and definitely eliminate the rats. It's just a little mouse. I scared you so much. I will send 2 people to you tonight. Mr. Yang, your idea is good, but it is not applicable. The base has its own arrangements in this regard. What you need to think about now is how to deal with the smog. Seeing that they refused to listen, Yang Mohan did not try to persuade them any further. In the evening, Celine checked the power grid again to make sure there were no loopholes, and then went back for dinner. There was a sudden attack by rats last night, and many people downstairs were cursing that all their food had been eaten. In order not to attract attention, their meal today was very light, with minced meat and eggplant, cold shrimp and broccoli, bitter melon and pork slices, and a seaweed egg soup. After the family had eaten and drunk their fill, the mother looked at the food piled against the wall and called Celine over. "Why don't we store the food in the space? If the electric fence can't stop the rats, it will be too late to store it." Dad nodded and said, "Yes, just leave a small portion and take it out after you finish eating." Celine didn't think the rats could break through the fence, but to reassure them, she still put away most of the supplies. Late at night, Celine was lying on her bed watching a horror movie while waiting for the mice to come to her door. She had seen a lot of horrible things, and she felt that the movie was too fake. She watched it from beginning to end and felt very calm. Just as I put the phone down, I heard the sound of a mouse crawling outside the window, and it was getting closer and closer. Before Celine could sit up from the bed, the sound of hitting mice came from downstairs. The lights in the surrounding apartment buildings turned on at almost the same time, and curses were heard one after another. Apparently, she wasn't the only one waiting for the mouse. Celine stared at the electric fence intently. The sound of mice was getting closer and closer, and a dark shadow appeared at the window. The two mice sniffed here and there, then stretched out their claws to scratch at the electric fence. SSSS. In the next second, the power grid flashed with blue-purple electricity, and a few mice fell down after uttering a cry. Next, more and more rats climbed onto the electric fence and were finally electrocuted and turned into roasted rats. The smell of barbecue filled the air, attracting many rats. Only then could the people, exhausted from hunting rats, take a break. Chapter 92: Granary Attacked. Giant rats kept pouring in. The windows and doors of the house kept crackling, and the smell of burning food filled the air. Celine went to check the other windows. The window outside David's room was full of rats and was blocked tightly. Seeing the mice behind rushing forward one after another, Celine increased the current. Seeing rats popping out one after another and the electricity was not enough, David yawned. "The power grid is blocking them from coming in. It's getting late. Let's go back to sleep. These rats cannot be eliminated in a short time, so just do what you need to do." Celine thought so too and went back to her room. The Wynn family's daily routine was not affected, but the other people in the base were miserable. They were already short of supplies, so they could only use wooden boards and wire to surround the windows. However, the giant rats had such sharp teeth that they bit all of them. There were at least dozens of rats running around in the house, biting anyone they saw. Many people were injured but did not dare to stop to treat their wounds, and instead used weapons to beat the rats. The men, in a rage, beat the rats recklessly, leaving things in the house broken into pieces. However, many rats still escaped, and most of the food in the house was eaten up. At this time, the benefits of living in a group are reflected. There are many people in the dormitory, so there is no need to be afraid of rats coming. Everyone can use a shovel to kill the rats. People living in tents were worried that mice would damage their tents, so they didn't even dare to set up their tents at night. They would run away when they saw mice coming. Fortunately, they didn't worry too much, and the loss was not great. At the same time, there were constant gunshots coming from the base's granary, but there were too many rats, and the speed of shooting could not keep up with the speed at which the rats were gnawing. More and more rats emerged from the base of the granary. Before anyone could react, the ground collapsed, revealing a hole about 20 centimeters in size. Countless rats swarmed out. Just seeing this scene made people feel weak. Some people killed the rats, and some people moved the food to the train. Hurry up. Food is related to the survival of the entire base. All those equipped with guns rushed over, and people nearby also came to support with weapons. There are too many rats. We can't kill them all. Everyone, hurry up. The person in charge of rat extermination shouted hurriedly. Everyone's face was solemn, and they didn't dare to stop. There were even rats on the side of the truck, so they had to assign some people to eliminate them. The giant rats ate very quickly. They bit through the rice bags and got in to eat. All the rice bags in the granary were covered with rats. Fortunately, more and more people came to support, and the transportation speed became much faster. People who exterminate rats also have to be careful not to hurt people by mistake, so they are a step slow in their actions. 5 hours later, the rats in the granary were either killed or escaped, leaving only a mess on the ground. Only a small amount of rice was left intact, and the other rice bags were all broken, with rice grains scattered in every corner of the granary. Many people felt very distressed when they saw this. There were still many people in the base who did not have enough food to eat, as all the food was destroyed by rats. The people present were so angry that their eyes turned red. There were piles of dead rats on the ground, and all kinds of disgusting smells mixed together, making people feel nauseous. The base commander looked at this scene with a gloomy face and regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. If they had listened to Yang Mohan at the beginning and kept the food separately, the loss would not have been so great. Count the remaining food and separate the intact rice. The base commander said coldly. Chapter 93. Panic at the base. The next day, Celine turned off the power to the grid and opened the door. She saw a small mountain of charred rat carcasses outside, at least hundreds of them. Alex took out a broom and a garbage shovel, and while cleaning he said, "Has the rat's nest been poked?" So many of them popped out all of a sudden. David, who was helping to open the garbage bag, continued. It was extremely hot before, and now it's extremely cold. The alternation of hot and cold has caused the mice to mutate, and they are also lacking food. They must not attack human bases. David muttered, "It's a pity that I don't dare to eat the mutant mouse. Otherwise, it would be a piece of fat meat." David was not the only one who thought so. Many people in the base looked at the mice as big as cats and wished that what they saw were pieces of pork. Celine carried several large bags of rats downstairs and threw them into the trash can. A resident who also came downstairs to throw away the dead rats complained. The rats that got into my house yesterday were from the stinking ditch. They were dirty and smelly. My family was almost vomiting from the fumes. The rat we killed last night came out of the manure pit. When I think of the smell now, I feel sick. After hearing this, Celine quietly moved away from the man. Before I went upstairs, I heard a dozen people discussing something enthusiastically. The granary was destroyed last night. I heard that the rice is almost gone. Life will be hard for a while. If you still have rice left at home, save it now. If things continue like this, you won't have any rice to eat even if you have work points. How could this happen? What do those people in the base do for a living? So many people can't even guard a granary. Not only the granary, I heard that the supermarket's warehouse was also attacked, and there is not much left inside. The news hasn't spread yet, so it's still time to go to the supermarket to buy things. In 2 hours, you'll have to fight with others for supplies. Hearing this, everyone's face changed, and they turned and ran away. I'm afraid that if I go too late, I won't be able to buy anything. The person who went downstairs to throw away the dead rat didn't care about anything else and ran along with them. Those who didn't receive the message were still confused and looked at them running with a blank look on their faces. Celine frowned. It seemed that the senior management of the base did not listen to Yang Mohan's suggestion to separate the rice. It would take nearly a day to move several tons of rice, which is simply too late when rats invade. Anyone with a brain would have thought of this. Unless those officials are too arrogant and think that they have guns in their hands and can kill any number of rats. But no matter how fast you shoot, there will be a time to pause. Rats will come out in droves, and even if you shoot with both hands at the same time, you won't be able to catch them all. Celine sighed with regret. The good rice was gone, all fed into the mice's stomachs. The news could not be concealed at all, and soon the entire base knew that the rice was almost gone. Everyone panicked and ran to supermarkets or office buildings. Have the top brass at the base gone mute? Can you please explain whether the news is true or not? Is there any need to ask this? The supermarkets on the base are all closed, and there are so many people banging on doors outside because they can't buy anything. The staff inside even threatened to take note of anyone who caused trouble and not sell anything to him in the future. What a powerful official. I guess they divided up the little food left inside among themselves, and then used various excuses to phase us. Let's all rush together and grab as much as we can. If we wait any longer, not a single grain of rice will be left for us. Only what's in our pockets belongs to us. The crowd was very excited and was about to fight with the guards. The base commander had no choice but to step forward and respond to the matter. The granary was attacked by rats, but the damage is not as serious as everyone thinks. The supermarket will be temporarily closed for the next 2 days and will reopen after the supplies are sorted out. I hope everyone will not spread rumors, do not believe in rumors, and give the base a little more confidence. Citizen A, I don't believe it, unless you open the granary and let us take a look. If there is enough food, we will leave. Citizen B, that's right, words are not enough. You have guns in your hands. Are you still worried that we will rob you? Citizen C. I hope the base can do something about its personnel. We are not fools. Stop using tricks to fool people. Chapter 94: The Importance of Having a Generator. The base commander's face darkened. I repeat, the food loss is not great. The most important thing right now is to eliminate the mutant rats. Anyone who dares to incite trouble and deliberately disrupt the base will be expelled. After saying this, the base commander turned and walked into the office building. The people outside subconsciously wanted to follow in, and the armed guards immediately pointed their guns at them and said, "Back off." Everyone's face changed, and no one dared to gamble their lives. After a long stalemate, the crowd chose to leave. The food incident still caused panic among the people at the base, especially since the base did not show the proper attitude and instead made more verbal threats, which made everyone panic. Those who had food at home began to tighten their belts. Some people were worried that their work was in vain and that they could not buy supplies even with their work points, so they simply gave up their jobs. The base commander found Young Mohan and asked him to find a way to eliminate the giant rats. Those rats are too big and very aggressive, so they're not easy to catch. The base has tried to set traps, but they were effective at the beginning. Later, the rats learned to avoid them. Does the Institute have any potions that can be used? Young Mohan. Are you referring to poison? Ordinary rat poison doesn't work. Poison is the best, said the base commander. I suggest you go to the hospital to ask. After all, the Research Institute is for scientific research, not medical studies. Young Mohan retorted indifferently. They really think he is omnipotent and can achieve whatever he wants. The constant temperature greenhouse was built and the cold-resistant seeds were cultivated. Then he was asked to study poisons without stopping. The remuneration was enough. The base commander choked on his words and glared at him. Then think of a way to consolidate the granary. There are only about 2 tons of rice left. We can't let it be attacked again, otherwise the base will be in chaos. If those people have no food to eat, they will do whatever they want, and it will be impossible to suppress them. Let's try using the power grid. Young Mohan had finally found a place to stay, and he didn't want the base to fall into chaos. The base commander thought for a moment and decided to listen to him. Just as he was about to give the order, Young Mohan said again, "Remember to prepare a generator." Just as he was about to ask, there was a knock on the door, and a senior executive came in hurriedly. Half of the base's electrical wires were destroyed by rats. Now most of the base is without power. Base commander, this is the importance of having a generator. The apartment building where the Wen family lives was also within the range of the power outage. Fortunately, they have generators which does not affect the use of the power grid. The generator has not been used since arriving at the base. Celine was connecting power to the grid when she inadvertently glanced and saw 2 women standing outside the large iron gate at the stairs. She pretended not to see them. The 2 women thought she would ask something, but Celine simply ignored them. "Hello, we are neighbors living downstairs. Do you still have that internet? The one with electricity. Can we buy it from you?" There is no shortage of people in the apartment building who observe how other families live, and they have long had their eyes on the Wen family. Occasionally, when I met people from the Wen family in the elevator and greeted them, they would just nod without saying a word. After a few times, the people in the building simply ignored them and treated the Wen family as a topic of conversation after dinner. Until the mutant rats invaded, they discovered that only the Wen family had no losses, as they were all blocked by the net outside. You can make it yourself with iron wire and then connect it to electricity. Celine replied casually. The 2 men outside looked embarrassed. "We don't have any wires or generators." Celine gave them a cold look and said, "I've already told you the method. You can figure out the rest yourself." "I'll buy it with food," said another man hurriedly. "We'll find a way to get electricity ourselves. Can we just buy the wire?" Celine thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, 1 bundle of wire and 20 kilograms of rice." The man's expression froze for a moment, his dark face full of hesitation, and from his shabby clothes it could be seen that he had not had a good life. No matter how pitiful the other person was, Celine would not give in and would wait for his decision. After a long while, the man nodded slowly, his eyes full of helplessness. "Okay, I'll change." The man who came with her didn't say anything, but just stared at Celine, half of his face hidden in the darkness. The man who agreed to the exchange quickly went downstairs and brought up the rice. Celine also pretended to walk into the house, but actually took out a bundle of wire from the space. "There are 20 kilograms of rice, not a pound less. You can take it to weigh." The man held up a bag of rice in a red plastic bag. Celine opened the big iron gate, took the bag of rice, waited to make sure the weight was enough, and then checked whether there was anything else mixed in the bag. Celine nodded in satisfaction. Just as she was about to give him the wire, a dark figure rushed up from the side. She looked stern and kicked the man to the ground. She kicked him without mercy, and the man rolled over and howled in pain. Celine looked coldly at the man who exchanged the rice. Did these two people collude in advance? He was startled and quickly clarified. I don't know him. He has nothing to do with me. Seeing that he did not seem to be lying, Celine gave him the wire and locked the iron door. Chapter 95, The Mutant Rat Disappeared. Thick fog enveloped the entire base, and half of the area lost power, plunging the entire base into near darkness. The base mobilized everyone to take action to eliminate the mutant rats. For the sake of their own safety, everyone temporarily put aside their prejudices against the base. That night, everyone prepared traps and hid in the dark, watching with eager eyes. Everything was ready except for the east wind, and we waited for 2 hours. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the mutant rat still hadn't appeared. Everyone was confused. Could it be that the mutant rats had developed intelligence and knew that they had set a trap, so they didn't come? Celine stood on the balcony and looked at the people returning disappointed below. They had been busy setting traps for an entire afternoon, hoping to catch all the mutant rats, but in the end it was all in vain. Everyone comforted each other. The mutant rats were scared by us, and they dare not come. Yes, we should think positively. The trap is there anyway. We can catch one if one comes. If two come, we can catch a pair. No matter how cunning the mutant rat is, it is still an animal. It should train for a few hundred years before fighting against humans. Everyone burst into laughter. Those who thought they had set up a perfect trap went home and slept soundly. Alex looked at the dark sky not far away, feeling that a storm was coming. They are too happy too early. David, you should yell down there. Alex glanced at him and said, if you want to be beaten up, I can help you. Celine. The mutant rats did not appear that night, and the people who had been harassed for several days finally had a good sleep. The Wynn family still lived their lives happily. Celine took out 3 king crabs and some lamb chops from the space. That's all for tonight. Tell me if you want anything else. Celine said with a smile. David cried out in excitement and hugged Celine without saying anything. How could I be so worthy to have such a good sister? Celine held her forehead and laughed. By the way, there are traps downstairs. You must be careful when you go out. Just now, someone's foot was caught in a mousetrap, and he fainted from the pain on the spot. Mom reminded. Dad added. Those mousetraps are specially used to deal with mutant mice. They are more than 10 times larger than ordinary mousetraps. The fog in the entire base was getting thicker and thicker, and visibility was low. Even the huge mousetrap placed in front of us could not be seen. Now traveling has become like a blind man. You have to use a stick to feel around to make sure there are no traps before you dare to go. The base calls on people not to go out for the time being. Celine hadn't been out for the past 2 days and had no idea that the situation outside had become so severe that it was impossible to travel. On the second and third nights, the mutant rats still did not come. Many people were hoping for the best, thinking that the mutant rats had gone to attack other places and would not come back in the short term, so the traps they had set could be set. The base is full of traps, and you could fall into them at any time. You have to be very careful when walking on the road. Such days make people resentful. The base could not withstand the pressure from the masses and could only promise to remove the traps if the mutant rats did not come within a week. Celine ignored the various policies of the base. To put it bluntly, they had little to do with her, and she didn't need to rely on the base to survive. So she thought about growing mushrooms. There happened to be 3 large bags of mushroom growing bags in the space. It was either too hot or too cold before, so it was not suitable to take them out for planting. Now it was just the right time. The steps are not difficult with ready-made mushroom bags. Celine took out 3 flower pots, put the mushroom bags inside, then opened the outer packaging bags and used a spray bottle to spray water to keep it moist. After a few days, the mushrooms will grow. Mom is very particular about mushrooms and checks every day to see if they are moist enough. Seeing this, Celine just lets them do nothing. A week passed like this, and the mutant rats didn't come at all. Not even a shadow of them was seen. The base also relaxed its vigilance and ordered people to remove all the traps. At first, some people couldn't sleep because of this and kept their eyes open until dawn. After waiting for a few days, nothing happened and they were finally relieved. The base commander quickly notified people to repair the circuit, and the wires that were damaged by the mutant rats were also reconnected. The street lights in the base were turned on again, and the visibility on the road was much better. At 7 o'clock in the evening, many people came out to set up stalls to earn food. There is no exact time when the supermarket in the base will open. Stall owners do not need work points to sell things and can only exchange goods. A vendor brought back a lot of shoes and clothes from outside, and he could exchange them for any food. A lot of people gathered at his stall, picking and choosing. These clothes are not clean, and everyone can guess where they come from, but no one cares about it anymore. It is good enough to be alive because only by being alive there is hope. A woman was choosing shoes when her foot was suddenly stepped on by someone. She said unhappily, "Can the person next to me please stop squeezing me?" A man not far away was also stepped on several times. He could no longer bear it. "There are so many people on the stall. Why are you in such a hurry? Can you pay more attention to others? Why are you stepping on me alone?" "Ah, who stepped on me?" "I was stepped on too." They all looked down and saw a dark figure as big as a cat jumping out from under the stall. A scream cut through the night sky. "Run! The mutant rats are coming again." Chapter 96, Terror Attacks. The mutant rats reappeared and caused a sensation in the entire base. Before everyone could react, countless rats rushed in from the stinking ditches and outside the base. The mutated rats came with great force, even more terrifying than the rat plague. They pounced on people and bit them. People could not avoid them, and screams continued to be heard. "Help!" A terrified voice rang out. A man not far away was covered with rats, so densely packed that it looked terrifying. In order to get rid of the rats, the man could only roll on the ground, but it didn't help much. Everyone was in danger and was running home desperately, so they had no time to care about others. A voice came from the loudspeaker of the base. "Don't disperse your strength. Unite and work together to eliminate the mutant rats." The crowd in panic simply couldn't listen, and the unscrupulous people even pushed the people around them to the front when the rat pounced on them. There were too many mutant rats, and two fists could not fight four hands. Everyone looked for a place to hide, and the nearest room was crowded with people. The man with mutant rats crawling all over his body was shouting for help outside the door and knocking on it continuously, but no one in the house dared to open it. The man outside had despair in his eyes and was losing his life bit by bit, but the mutant rats did not let him go and continued to eat his flesh and blood. This horrifying scene made everyone in the room tremble all over and hold the door tightly. The base was filled with screams of fear. The guards at the base were trying their best to protect everyone, and the gunfire never stopped. When there are too many mutant rats to kill them all, it doesn't matter whether you have a gun or not. At this moment, everyone regretted removing the mousetrap. Their carelessness harmed themselves. Celine heard some noise outside, went out to take a look, and found countless rats climbing up the wall. The mutant rats were very fast and could crawl on the walls as if they were walking on flat ground. The entire apartment building was making quite a bit of noise, with the sounds of smashing and looting being deafening. Celine quickly closed the doors and windows and turned on the power grid. Not long after, the sharp squeaking of rats was heard outside the door, followed by a foul and burnt smell. The mice at the back seemed to realize that they couldn't break into the Wynn family's house, so they turned around and left. Celine took out the roasted meat and threw it outside the door. The aroma attracted the rats. Not long after, the rats swarmed up again and fell down in large numbers after touching the electric fence. Seeing this, David snatched the barbecue from Celine and threw it out the door accurately. The mice kept squeezing in and touching the electric fence, repeating the cycle. Seeing him having so much fun, Celine was speechless, but this method could eliminate more mutant rats. In less than half an hour, the dead rats outside had piled up into a small hill, which was pitch black and emitting hot air. A burst of dense footsteps was heard, and people downstairs ran up and were stopped outside the iron gate. Celine pleadingly, "There are too many mutant rats. We can't kill them all. Can you let us go in and hide for a while? We will leave after the mutant rats are gone." "The mutant rats are coming. Open the door quickly. Someone was bitten. Please save us. Please. I am willing to work like a slave for you from now on, and I will give you all my supplies. They're coming up, run." The only one who could save them now was Celine. Everyone shook the iron gate and begged her. Mom couldn't bear to look at it, so she sighed and went back into the house. Celine rejected their request. "Our place is small and can't accommodate so many people. You can only find a way to save yourselves." Not to mention that she is not a soft-hearted person. If she turns off the power and opens the door, those mutant rats will rush in. Not only will the scene become more chaotic, but their entire family will also be put in a passive situation. More and more mutant rats rushed up, and those who ran up were blocked outside the iron gate with no way to go, and screams continued. Some people even knelt down before Celine and begged her for help, but Celine just frowned and turned away in silence. "Save my child." In the corner, a woman was holding a child who was only about 2 years old, crying and begging. Everyone is struggling to protect themselves, so how can they care about others? Thump, thump, thump. The sound of Gatling gun's gun suddenly rang out, and the rats that ran up were hit and fell down one after another. Celine stood behind the iron gate and fired at the mutant rats. 5 minutes later, the mutant rats were completely suppressed by Celine's firepower and could not get out of the line. The mutant rats changed direction and ran downstairs. The people standing outside the iron gate breathed a sigh of relief, and some people complained quietly. "You obviously have the ability to save us. Why didn't you do it earlier?" Celine sneered, "Because people like you are not worth saving. It's a waste of bullets." After saying that, Celine turned around and walked back into the house. Those who had complaints in their hearts were completely panicked when they saw Celine leave. They didn't dare to stay there any longer, fearing that the mutant rats would come up again, so they hurried home. The mutant rat sneak attack lasted nearly 7 hours. After the mutant rats fled, they left behind a devastated base. Chapter 97. No food left. The infrastructure in the base was destroyed, all the electrical wires were bitten off, and various malfunctions occurred frequently. The originally clean base was now littered with dead rats on the roads, emitting a foul stench. The sneak attack caused dozens of deaths and hundreds of injuries. The base's medical facilities could not keep up, and most people had to save themselves. This was not the worst. At 8 o'clock the next morning, the base announced an unacceptable news. The rice in the granary was almost eaten by the mutant rats, leaving less than 1,000 kilograms and unable to be supplied. This remark left everyone dumbfounded, and people gathered outside the office building again to seek an explanation. This is not the first time that mutant rats have appeared. Why is the base still taking it so lightly? How can everyone survive without food? I think it's better to just rush in and grab everything we can so that everyone can save some food to save their lives. Don't think you can bully others just because you have a few guns. You are not the only ones with guns in the base. As soon as he finished speaking, the man pulled out a gun from his pocket and pointed it at the guards at the base. "Why don't you guys try to see whose bullet is faster?" Seeing this, everyone stopped pretending and took out their guns, and the two sides confronted each other. If a real fight breaks out, no one will gain any advantage. The head of the base was overwhelmed. "Everyone calm down. The base belongs to all of us. Our first priority is to unite. We admit that the food is not well guarded, but everyone knows what happened yesterday. The guards are already doing their best to protect the food. Do you believe this? I suspect you secretly hid the food and deliberately lied to us that it was eaten by mutant rats. Several tons of food disappeared without a trace. We don't trust you unless you let us in to search. This matter is not over today. At worst, we can change someone else to manage the base. Whoever is capable can do it." After these incidents, the base's credibility has been lost and no one can trust them at all. People can only assume the worst of them. Seeing that they were adamant about not changing their ways and were determined to cause trouble, the base commander's face darkened. It is simply unrealistic to fight, and the end result will only be mutual destruction. "Okay, you can search as much as you want. If we hide even a grain of rice, you will take over this base." The crowd immediately scattered. Some rushed into the office building, some went to the factory, and some went to the supermarket and warehouse. After a chaotic search, everyone was horrified to find that the food was really gone. There was no point in continuing to pressure the base, and for a moment panic was spreading endlessly. Seeing that they had finally quieted down, the base commander continued, "We have searched you already. Now can we sit down and discuss what to do next? As managers of the base, we are always thinking about how to develop the base so that everyone can have enough food and clothing. However, things don't go as planned. We thought that with the constant temperature greenhouse, food could be grown, but smog came and mutant rats appeared. We are well aware of the importance of food and have put a lot of effort into this area. We even installed an electric fence around the granary. Last night, the wires and generators were damaged by mutant rats and the grid failed. Even if the guards had guns, they couldn't do anything to them. I'm not saying this to exonerate myself. What has happened has already happened, and time cannot be reversed. We have no choice but to move forward. I hope everyone can unite and overcome the difficulties together. The base commander's heartfelt words silenced everyone present. What can we do if there is a commotion? The base can't provide food, and we can't just tear down this last shelter. If you really can't stay here, just go to another base. Someone said in a low voice. The car is out of gas. Are we going to walk there? That's totally unrealistic. There is a constant temperature shed on top of the base. It may have given you the illusion that the extreme cold has passed. Go walk around outside the base and see if you can stand it for 10 minutes. Other bases may not be as good as this one. A few days ago, I talked to a guy who had just arrived. He came from Base C. There was no constant temperature shed there, and there was no food. Many people were starving, and there was a big commotion in the base. If we don't want to leave but want to survive, we have to find a way to build a base. Otherwise, we're all doomed. These words made everyone's heart sink. The base commander waited until they calmed down before continuing. Don't be so pessimistic. If you run out of food, you can go out and look for supplies. The first thing we need to do is to eliminate the mutant rats and at the same time find a way to eliminate the impact of the fog. The base has been researching planting and has never given up. Everyone can say nice things, but many people are not interested, have nothing to eat, and are not sure if they have a future. The troublemakers lost their motivation and left in despair. Because the mutant rats caused everyone to lose their food, everyone's anger was aroused at once. When the mutant rats appeared again, there was no more fear in everyone's eyes. They all raised their sticks, and their potential seemed to be stimulated. They beat the mutant rats and made them flee in all directions. Not long after, the base announced that the Research Institute had invented a hallucinogenic spray that would cause rats to have hallucinations and would no longer attack humans, allowing them to catch all the rats in one fell swoop. Thanks to everyone's efforts, the number of mutant rats has become fewer and fewer. Except for one or two occasionally, they no longer appear in groups. Having learned from the previous experience, even if the mutant rats are gone, people dare not let their guard down. In addition to giving everyone a bottle of hallucinogenic spray, the door and other parts were also reinforced. The mutant rat crisis has been temporarily resolved, and food is still a stone hanging in everyone's heart. Ever since I learned that the base could no longer provide food, it no longer mattered whether I earned work points or not. Those who had cars could only leave the base to look for supplies, but it was still freezing cold outside. In order to get a bite to eat, you have to go farther away, and the road is full of unknown dangers. Those who have no means of transportation can only stay indoors, eat less and move less, and maybe they can hold on for a while. Though when family members did not go to work anymore, there were a lot of supplies in the Celine space, and they did not need to go out. That day, the family had lunch and sat in the living room playing mahjong, while Celine was watching TV series. It seemed like they were living a peaceful life. At this moment, there was a sudden noisy sound downstairs, as if someone was fighting. The number of fights in the base has increased sharply recently. Either someone is robbed while walking on the road, or someone ambushes them in advance. In this situation, passersby will not help at all, but will run home in a hurry, fearing that they will become the target of robbery. The base initially sent people to manage the situation, but later they simply pretended they knew nothing and let them do whatever they wanted. Later, a vicious cycle began, with more and more people causing trouble and robbery becoming commonplace. Apartment buildings have also become a target of public criticism. Chapter 98 Mom is missing. People in the entire building were in a panic, and in order to avoid becoming targets, many people moved out overnight. The Wynn family was blocked by an iron gate, so those people could only shout outside the door. When Celine couldn't stand it anymore, she just walked out with a Gatling gun and looked at them without saying a word. Those people were frightened, and later someone spread the news, and the robbers ignored them. I thought everything was safe, but my mother was still kidnapped. That night, my mother took the garbage downstairs and threw it away while no one was around to cause trouble. The electrical circuits near the apartment building have been repaired, so it doesn't take too much time to go up and down by elevator. Celine was sitting in the living room eating fruit. After waiting for 5 minutes and not seeing her mother come back, she immediately got up and went downstairs. When I came downstairs, I didn't see my mother. Mom made no friends on the base, and she would not stay longer than she did during this dangerous time. The one family father and son came quickly, and the father's heart was lifted. "Where is your mother?" "I don't know. I haven't seen anyone since I came down." "Hurry up and split up to look for it," Alex said immediately. They ran in 4 directions and searched the entire base several times, but still couldn't find their mother. There's a good chance that Mom has been kidnapped, David said worriedly. Celine frowned. Her mother was the weakest among them. If she fell into the hands of a cruel person. Thinking of this, a hint of murderous intent flashed in her eyes. If anything happened to her mother, she would never let those people go. If the kidnappers wanted supplies, they would have notified us. Now we can only wait for them to come to us. Alex patted his father's shoulder. There's no point in being anxious now. Calm down. There were many people and eyes in the base, and there was no telling how many people had secretly watched them in this building alone. No matter how they analyzed it, they couldn't find out who the kidnapper was. Dong, dong, dong. There was a sudden knock on the door. The Wen family looked at each other. Could it be that the kidnappers had arrived? Celine was the first to go out and open the door. Standing outside the door was a handsome man, Yang Mohan. Seeing the Wen family in a hurry, Yang Mohan was stunned for a moment. After reacting, he quickly asked, "What happened?" Judging from their expressions, they were probably waiting for someone, not standing here to greet him. Celine led him into the house and told him that her mother had been kidnapped. "We are waiting for the robbers to come." Dad was so worried about his beloved wife that he couldn't even force a smile on his face. Yang Mohan thought for a moment. "Recently, there have been a lot of small gangs that rob things in the base, and I took care of a few of them. Do you know where their lair is?" "Take me there," Celine said immediately. She couldn't just wait for the kidnappers to come to her. The sooner she found her mother, the less suffering she would suffer. The Wen family, father and son, also stood up. The father forced a smile and said, "Xiao Yang, I'll leave this matter to you. Once you rescue the person, we will reward you handsomely." "Uncle, that's too polite. Annie is so good to me. I will do my best to save her," Yang Mohan said quickly. Celine looked at her father and said, "Dad, Yang Mohan and I will go. You guys wait at home. If the kidnappers come to deliver the letter, we can respond quickly." Celine didn't want to take them with her. She was good at climbing walls and running on rooftops, so she didn't want to alert the enemy this time. It would be more convenient for her to act alone. "Don't worry, Uncle. I will take good care of Celine," Yang Mohan promised. "Dad!" Why does this sound so awkward to him? But they couldn't care less about that now. Since Celine also meant so, they could only follow the arrangement. "Okay, be careful. If you can't deal with it, notify us in time for rescue," Dad said worriedly. Celine nodded and left one after another with Yang Mohan. "I haven't seen you for a while. How are you?" Celine casually found a topic. Yang Mohan smiled and said, "We were very busy a few days ago." Later, the base ran out of supplies to distribute, and the research institute was in disarray. The food was eaten up by the mutant rats, and the remaining 1,000 kilograms was divided up by the base director and other management personnel. He received news that the base director was preparing to flee. Celine was not surprised at all to hear the news. Without food as its foundation, the base would be like a pot of loose sand. Even the guards ran away. Can we still expect the base commander to take care of them? After the extreme cold came, there were not many resources to be found. Now, even the top leaders of the base were in a panic. Those who could make money naturally would not care about morality. "What are your plans?" Yang Mohan asked casually. Celine frowned. "I don't know. Maybe he will leave here and go to another base. M base is no longer safe, and there is no point in continuing to use it as a shelter. She has no shortage of supplies. She has the means of transportation, and her freedom is not restricted." Yang Mohan looked at her seriously with his dark eyes. "If you want to leave, can you tell me in advance?" Celine pursed her red lips. She didn't like to have too much interaction with other people. After a moment of silence, she nodded slightly. The man laughed, as if this was something worth celebrating. 10 minutes later, they arrived at the base of the first small gang. This is a small villa with a mountain behind it. There are quite a few people in this gang. I have inquired, and only a few of them have guns. In the end times, guns are king. Celine also quietly took out her gun, and the two came to the window on the first floor. Celine peeked inside and saw only a few men in the hall, with 3 women pouring drinks for them. "Brother, what are you going to do with that woman?" a man inside asked. Hearing this, Celine's face turned cold. Was her mother really caught by them? The other men laughed maliciously. "Of course the boss is the one who should ask this question. When the boss gets tired of it, it will be our turn. That woman is a little older, but she's still pretty. You have to change your taste once in a while. Go and bring that woman up here." Hearing those unbearable conversations, Celine's delicate face was covered with frost, and the bullets in the gun were ready to fire. "Stay away. Celine saw young Mohan approaching her and lowered her voice. If she couldn't help it and took out the Gatling gun, the destructive power would be huge. Young Mohan didn't move, his eyes fell on her, his voice was charming and pleasant. I will help you. Celine nodded, ignored him, and continued to stare inside. Two men came over, holding a woman. Their backs were facing Celine, so she couldn't see the woman's face clearly. Brother, the people are here. The two men pushed the woman into the arms of a bearded man. Celine narrowed her eyes dangerously and pointed the black muzzle of the gun at the person inside. Let me go. The woman turned around while struggling. Not Mom. Chapter 99, Do you have space to? Celine breathed a sigh of relief and put the gun away. I'll go in and search. As she spoke, she walked to the door and kicked it open. Several men inside were preparing to do something when someone suddenly broke in, and they were almost scared. The people in other rooms heard the noise and ran out, staring at Selene's cold face in shock. Who are you? The leading man frowned and motioned to his men to bring his guns. A group of people looked at them warily and slowly surrounded them. After hearing this, Celine guessed that they did not kidnap her mother. Otherwise, I wouldn't have not known her. Young Mohan. Annie shouldn't be here. Don't waste time here, let's go. Celine nodded, and the two of them pointed their guns at the people inside and stepped back. Stop. You can come and go as you please. What do you think of this place? The leading man stared at them with ferocity in his eyes. Celine looked at the man next to her and raised an eyebrow. It looks like they won't let us leave without a fight. Young Mohan raised the corner of his mouth in a cold arc and fired before the leading man. Almost immediately, Celine turned around and started shooting at the people surrounding them. There were constant gunshots, sparks flying, and things in the house were broken into pieces. The two men did not linger in the fight and ran away after the fight. Young Mohan brought Celine to the area where the prefabricated houses were being built. The surroundings were eerily quiet, with no one in sight. There is also a gang here that specializes in robbery. Those people have privately divided the base into different areas and usually do not interfere with each other. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. The influence of the official people in the base is getting weaker and weaker. Don't underestimate these gangs. If they have guns and supplies, they might rule the base one day. The two men quietly groped their way behind the board house and found that the doors and windows of one of the rooms were closed and there was someone guarding outside. I'll go over and take care of them. Young Mohan said first. Celine nodded slightly, and while Young Mohan was away, she took out a silenced gun from the space. She had just changed her gun when Young Mohan had already dealt with the man guarding the door. She walked towards him quickly. Young Mohan violently tore off the lock on the door and threw it aside. The two men walked into the cabin and saw that it was filled with looted supplies. There were 20 bags of rice, more than 10 boxes of flour and noodles, 10 boxes of soda, 5 boxes of canned food, 8 boxes of self-heating pots, 2 cabinets of instant noodles and ham, and even 2 boxes of erbo too. It really makes me feel bad not to take so many things away, but if I put them into the space, how can I get young Mohan away? As she was thinking, Celine noticed that the man was looking at her with an ambiguous look in his eyes. Let's take these things away. Young Mohan curled his lips and said, how about we split them in half when the time comes? Celine raised her eyebrows. Do you have any way to take it away without anyone noticing? Have you heard of storage space? Young Mohan looked at her steadily with his deep black eyes. Celine looked at him in shock and blurted out, you have space too? Also, young Mohan pondered the word for a while, slowly came back to his senses and chuckled. Isn't this a coincidence? No wonder you never lack food. At first he was worried that Celine had nothing to eat, so he tried every means to send food to her. Later he found that the Wen family had abundant supplies, and they even had things that could not be produced now. He had been puzzled before, but today he finally knew what was going on. Chapter 100 The space is not large. Celine raised her eyebrows in surprise and said jokingly, no wonder so many things appeared in your incubator when you went out to transport food. At that time, she did not think that she was not the only one with space in the world, and she thought that young Mohan was capable of finding so many supplies. Besides, he is a staff member of the Research Institute, so it is normal for him to invent some equipment to store food. Based on his identity and the certainty of his abilities, some flaws became commonplace. After a pause, Celine asked again in confusion, why didn't you take the weapons away when you were in KnowThe village? Young Mohan said helplessly, although I have storage space, the area is not large, only 10 square meters. Later, when the natural disaster came, it was filled with food and there was no extra space for weapons. After that, he asked again, "How big is your space?" "Infinite." Celine curled her lips. It had to be her. Young Mohan showed a hint of envy in his eyes, and then heard Celine ask, "How did you get your space?" Young Mohan did not hide it. "It's a ring passed down from my grandfather. I accidentally opened it before the natural disaster. I used it to store important information." When the natural disaster first started, he vaguely felt that the world was going to change, so he stockpiled a lot of food. Together with what he stored later, the food in the space was enough for him to eat for a long time. Since the storage space was too small, no matter how much supplies there were, they could not be stuffed in. He could only eat while hoarding. He estimated that it would not be a problem to eat for 10 years. "We'll each take half of these things. Hurry and put them into the space before anyone finds out," young Mohan reminded. Neither of them hesitated any longer, nor did they think about the detailed division. They just took the estimated amount. There was a lot of food in Celine's space, and there was no shortage of staple food such as rice, so she gave the staple food to young Mohan. A minute later, the two of them had emptied the supplies in the house and continued to look for their mother. The rows of wooden houses were not easy to find, so they focused on looking for those that were guarded. After searching around, there was still no sign of my mother. "It seems that my mother was not arrested by this gang," said Na'anif. "Then let's go to the next one." Young Mohan said, "There is also a gang in the staff dormitory. They hooked up with the management before the turmoil in the base. With the protection of the people in the base, no one knows what they are doing in secret." Celine couldn't help but look at him and chuckled. "You know a lot. There's no other way. The base was built not long ago, and there are still many problems in its management. I have to find out clearly. Maybe it will be helpful to me someday." Young Mohan spread his hands. He was inside the base, so it was easier for him to find out the information. In addition to this inside information, young Mohan also figured out a lot of shortcuts and took Celine through many twists and turns to quickly get to the staff dormitory. The management staff of the base live better than ordinary people. It is also renovated based on the original school dormitories, but it has electricity and water and a small garden. Not only is the place spacious, but it is also guarded by special people. Celine was just thinking about bypassing the guards and climbing up the wall when she saw young Mohan walking forward calmly. She hesitated for a moment, then followed him. "Mr. Yang, which leader are you looking for today?" The guard was very familiar with young Mohan. He would come to see a certain leader every now and then. The superiors also told not to stop him. "I'm here to see Director Wang," young Mohan said calmly as he walked towards the staff dormitory. Celine followed him leisurely. "Wait a moment." The guard suddenly spoke up and walked towards them. Celine's eyes were stern. Was she discovered? Chapter 101 Breakup? Young Mohan turned his head calmly, his voice showing a bit of impatience. "What else do you want?" The guard smiled flatteringly and said, "I forgot to tell you just now that Director Wang is not in the dormitory. He went out yesterday and hasn't come back yet." Young Mohan hummed. "It's the same if I report to other people." After he finished speaking, he walked into the dormitory building without looking back. Celine secretly breathed a sigh of relief and continued to follow him. The original dormitory building had 15 rooms on each floor. After the base occupied this place, the rooms were connected and each person occupied 3 rooms. There are only 5 senior people living here on one floor. As the two of them walked to the second floor, a middle-aged woman dressed brightly and beautifully came out. Her eyes lit up when she saw young Mohan. "Xiao Yang, who are you looking for today? Do you want me to take you there?" Celine noticed that the woman's eyes were fixed on young Mohan without any concealment. It was obvious that she had a crush on him, and for some reason, Celine felt a little unhappy. "No need." Young Mohan refused indifferently. Mrs. Chen didn't mind young Mohan's cold attitude. She showed a meaningful smile on her face, which was covered with powder, but couldn't hide the crow's feet. "The base has no food to distribute. You probably don't have much food at home. If you need anything, you can come to me." Celine's mouth twitched. This woman really dared to think so. However, she glanced at young Mohan's enchantingly handsome face. No woman of any age could resist him. A hint of disgust flashed across young Mohan's dark eyes. "No need, but there are many people in the base who don't have enough food to eat. I think they will be willing to let you do whatever you want." Seeing that he was not getting the point, Mrs. Chun stopped smiling and showed a haughty expression. "Don't be shameless. If it weren't for your good looks and potential as a gigolo, I wouldn't even look at anyone else if they tried to please me. Ma'am, please forgive me for being blunt, but you are too old. You may not be able to eat even with your eyes closed. Mrs. Chen only noticed Celine after hearing her words. After taking a look at the two of them, she sneered. Do you think young Mohan is a promising research institute employee? If you follow him, you will starve to death sooner or later. Do you want me to introduce you to some men with rich family backgrounds? Although they're a little older and ugly, you will be guaranteed to have a good life if you follow them. Hearing this, young Mohan's eyes suddenly filled with cold, murderous intent, and his whole body exuded a sinister aura. Celine smiled and said, Okay, but remember to find me the one with the biggest fortune. I won't do it for less. Young Mohan suddenly looked at her, his brows furrowed, his eyes full of disapproval. Noticing that he looked unhappy, Celine winked at him secretly. Mrs. Chun didn't notice that the two of them were secretly flirting with each other. When she heard that Celine agreed, her face was full of contempt. Love is worthless in the face of survival. Celine angrily and asked coldly, Are you serious? Celine spread her hands and pretended to feel guilty. If a man does not take care of himself, he will be punished by heaven and earth. I am sorry for you. I apologize to you. From now on, we will go our separate ways and never meet again. Although he knew she was not serious, young Mohan was still extremely unhappy when he heard this. He pursed his lips and tried hard to control himself. Okay, I respect your choice and hope you won't regret it. Young Mohan's handsome face was full of unbearableness and anger. Celine a cold look and turned away. Celine mockingly, You are smart and know how to plan for yourself. Stop talking nonsense and let's go. I can't wait to live a good life. Celine said anxiously, Come with me. Madame Chin smiled sinisterly in the dark. It was true that those old men had rich family backgrounds, but they were extremely stingy and only generous to herself. Moreover, some of their methods were extremely perverted. If you fell into their hands, you would be half dead if not dead. Celine followed her to the 5th floor, where there were 4 men guarding the stairs, all with guns in their hands. Is Mr. Zhang here? I brought a beautiful lady for him. Mrs. Chen asked in a coquettish manner. Several gatekeepers trembled uncontrollably and got goosebumps all over their bodies. Mrs. Chen's face froze, and she gritted her teeth viciously. Is she so scary? Several people quickly looked at Celine to cleanse their eyes, and they all showed a touch of surprise in their eyes. The woman in front of them had delicate features without any flaws. Her skin was white and tender. She was tall, her waist was slender, and her temperament was quiet and gentle, without any aggressiveness. Not bad, not bad. Master Zhang will definitely like it when he sees it. The 4 people nodded in agreement. As long as Master Zhang is satisfied, he will definitely not treat you unfairly. Remember to send such a high-quality woman to us next time. Mrs. Chun smiled and agreed. Okay, I'll leave the person to you. Okay, I'll send you the thank you gift later. Seeing Celine being taken away by 2 of them, she waved to the man who was standing guard. How? That woman is very playful, so don't be polite to her, Mrs. Chen hinted. The 2 men looked at each other and laughed obscenely. How many women can stand those tricks of Second Master? Chapter 102, I Won't Treat You Badly. Celine was led into a dim house by 2 men. The Second Master is in the innermost room. Go in by yourself. After saying that, the 2 men left without looking back and locked the door before leaving. Celine looked around. The room was dark and empty. There were 2 shelves against the wall, on which were placed various torture instruments, whips with spikes, knives of different lengths and sizes, maces, and candles. Ah, please spare me, help me. A shrill scream came from the innermost room. Celine frowned and was about to step in when a woman covered in blood and with messy hair stumbled out. The woman's face was full of fear. Before she could run 2 steps, a man with gray hair and a beard belly chased out and swung the long whip at her. The woman's voice was sharp and piercing, and she kept shrinking into the corner. At this moment, the woman noticed Celine and immediately pointed at her and yelled, Second Master, a new person has been sent over. The old man named Eerie suddenly stopped the whip he had just raised. He turned his head and his eyes fell on Celine's beautiful face. He rubbed his fat fingers on her greasy chin, and an excited and perverted smile appeared in his eyes. You come here? Eerie narrowed his already small eyes and hooked 4 fingers at Celine. The woman who was beaten to a pulp breathed a sigh of relief when she saw someone coming to replace her. She was finally rescued. If no one had come to replace her, she would have been beaten to death. The Second Master was just fed up with her and said coldly, Get out. To the woman, These words were like heavenly music. She ran out, crawling and tumbling, and gave Celine a sympathetic look when she passed by him. Celine raised a faint smile and walked towards the second master calmly. The woman who introduced me to you said that you can have a good life if you follow her. She is not lying to me, is she? She deliberately showed a look of disdain. This house is not even as good as the dormitory I live in. The second master was a little displeased when he heard this. As long as you serve me well, I won't treat you unfairly. His gaze fell on Celine's fair and smooth skin, and the cruelty in his eyes could no longer be concealed. This perfect body was covered with whip marks. Just thinking about it was so exciting and satisfying. Celine took in his expression. She had guessed that the woman would not be so kind and would definitely take revenge on her in secret. However, she did not expect that this person was not only old and ugly, but also so perverted and liked to torture people. If you want me to follow you obediently, you have to show me how strong you are first, otherwise I will leave immediately, Celine said in a deliberately soft voice. The second master laughed loudly, laughing at her naivety. Since you stepped in, there is no way out. Everyone outside is my people. Do you think you can run away? Celine raised her clear and beautiful eyes and opened her red lips slightly. You may not know that I am the base commander's man. If you dare to detain me or touch me, he will never forgive you. She pretended not to know how cruel the second master was, and said softly, but if I am willing to stay, you won't have a conflict. I came here to find a long-term meal ticket. At least let me see how much supplies you have. Then I will consider whether to follow you. When Eerie heard her say that she was the base commander's man, his face darkened. He had no doubt at all that a woman as beautiful as Celine could not be without a man to protect her. He was wondering whether to let the person go, but he didn't expect Celine to be willing to stay. It's just to look at the supplies. How difficult is that? I guarantee you won't want to leave after you see them. Chapter 103. Are you satisfied with what you see? Everyone can brag, Celine said with disdain. The second master threw away the whip in his hand, adjusted his collar with his fat hands, and sneered, Follow me. Celine followed fearlessly. Eerie came to a room at the end and took out a key from his pocket. All the supplies in here belong to me. If you stay, not only will you not have to live a hard life, but your family will also not have to worry about food. Celine looked in the direction the door slowly opened. The room was 50 square meters in size and was filled with supplies. Rice and other staple foods alone took up more than half of the space, and the food in other boxes was piled very high. Seeing this scene, Celine raised the corner of her mouth. Great! Another large amount of supplies entering the space. How about it? Are you satisfied with what you see? Asked the second master proudly, with an evil light flashing in his little eyes. Satisfied? Of course I'm satisfied. These things are all mine. As the last word fell, Celine quickly took out a silence gun from the space and pointed it at Eerie. The second master's face changed drastically, and the flesh on his face trembled. He slowly raised his hand, showing a flattering smile, and said flatteringly, Don't hurt my life. You can take these things. Celine glared at him coldly, taking in the man's terrified expression. Let me ask you, have you kidnapped a woman called Mom? No, it wasn't me. Eerie explained immediately, eagerly saying, We have never robbed others. These supplies were sent to us voluntarily by those people in order to seek protection. Celine didn't believe this at all. She continued to ask, Where are you holding people? Eerie hesitated for a moment, and finally, under the pressure of the gun, he whispered back, In the attic on the top floor. I've told you everything you want to know, and you can take the supplies. Can you let me go now? Eerie lowered his head, looking very honest, but where Celine couldn't see, there was a ruthless flash in his eyes. Okay, Celine's indifferent voice came. Eerie was delighted and turned around and ran out the door. Just as he was about to step out of the door and open his mouth to shout for help, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. His face turned pale in an instant, and he looked down at the position of his heart. A bullet passed through and hit the wall. Eerie turned his head tremblingly and saw Celine slowly putting down the gun in her hand. Her face was cold and frightening. He pointed at Celine with his fat finger for a long time, without saying a word, and finally fell down heavily with a bang. Celine was about to close the door when she heard footsteps outside. She immediately became alert, quickly put the second master's body into the space, and then hid behind the curtains. The footsteps outside the door suddenly disappeared. Just as Celine was thinking of making some noise to bring the person outside in, there was a sudden knock on the door. Celine frowned. and she simply walked out from behind the curtains and strode towards the door. The moment she opened the door, the black muzzle of a gun was suddenly pointed at her. The person holding the gun was Young Mohan. Their eyes met, and he immediately put down the gun and pushed her inside. "How did you get in?" Celine raised her eyebrows. There was someone guarding the stairs, and she didn't hear any fighting outside from beginning to end. "I pretended to be a newcomer and took care of the guards when they let down their guard." Young Mohan's handsome face looked a little ugly. "I hope that fat pig didn't do anything to you." Whenever he thought of the fat, wretched man touching her, he wanted to kill that man. Celine chuckled. "No, she is also a face control. If she is touched like Eerie, she will feel disgusted, so she avoids him carefully." Young Mohan finally let go of his worry. He looked around and didn't see the second master. There were bullet marks on the wall and a trace of dark red blood on the ground, but no body was found. He suddenly realized, "You killed the second master and threw the body into the space?" "That's right." Celine nodded slightly. "I'll go to the attic on the top floor first. If my mother isn't there, I'll come down to collect the supplies and leave." Just as she was about to walk out, Young Mohan suddenly reached out and pressed her shoulder and said in a magnetic voice, "I'd better go. My space is full of space. You stay and collect the supplies. We have to hurry. Second Master is not the boss of this gang. It will be troublesome if they come back." Celine nodded slowly and said, "If you can't solve it, come down and call me." "Good." The two of them acted separately. After Celine waited for Young Mohan to leave, she quickly put the supplies into the space. The room was full, and it looked like there were a lot of things, and there were even more when they were put away. Most of the supplies were thrown on the ground at random, and it took a lot of time to put them away one by one. 5 minutes later, Celine had collected only 1/3 of the money when Young Mohan pushed the door and walked in. "There are 3 young women locked up in the attic, but none of them is Aunt Lou," Young Mohan explained. The women were terrified when they saw him. He opened the door, looked inside, and left after making sure his mother was not there. "Okay, wait a moment, we'll be done soon." Celine nodded. Chapter 104: Unlimited Blackmail. The two ambushed all the gangs in the base but still couldn't find their mother, so they had to go back. When her father and his 2 sons saw her coming back, they immediately came over to her and handed her a letter. They said with a serious expression, "This was stuffed under the iron gate half an hour ago." Celine opened the envelope and saw the note inside. "If you want to save your mother, you can exchange the supplies in your space and come to the school auditorium alone at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." After reading the letter, Celine was a little surprised. She guessed that the person who kidnapped her mother did it for supplies, but she didn't expect that the other party actually knew that she had space. "Besides our family, who else would know that you have space?" Alex frowned. They had already ruled out everyone they knew. Their family has always been low-key and never boast to outsiders about how much food they have. They even go out to work early and come back late. Even people who live in the same building only think that their supplies are earned. "We'll know tomorrow." Celine's eyes turned dark. The first person to know that she had a space was Tina. Logically, she didn't even tell Wang Daji, let alone tell outsiders the news. Tina was thinking about the supplies in her space at the time. Telling this secret would only attract more attention and add pressure to herself. Tina would not be so stupid. Instead of dealing with a group of people who were eyeing her covetously, it would be better to deal with just one person. Apart from her family, the second person who knew that she had space was Young Mohan. She believed Young Mohan and believed that he would not have done this. So who is it? Celine didn't bother about it anymore. No matter who that person was, she had already touched her sore spot. The next day, Celine rushed to the school auditorium early in the morning. It was previously used as a meeting place by the base. She walked to the door, pricked up her ears, and listened. There was no movement inside, so she raised her hand and gently pushed the door open. The auditorium was empty, and the heavy curtains blocked out the light, making it very dark inside. Celine had good eyesight and noticed that there was no one inside, so she walked in. He looked around and frowned. "Where is the person?" At this moment, a seat in the first row caught her attention. There was a piece of paper on the chair. Celine walked over quickly and picked it up. It said, "I want a bag of 100 kilograms of rice, 50 kilograms of meat, and 50 kilograms of vegetables. Put the things down and leave. As long as you are obedient, Mom's life will not be in danger. The other supplies will be temporarily stored in your space." Celine sneered. That person had a nice idea. He wanted to use her space as a storage warehouse. She tore up the paper and was about to leave when she suddenly noticed a button on the chair next to her. It was from her mother's clothes. Celine was silent for a few seconds and finally took out the things as the other party requested. She walked out of the school hall and found a place to hide. Time passed by minute, and still no one appeared near the auditorium. This result was within Celine's expectations. She guessed that person must be secretly monitoring her every move. The other party was very cautious. Celine knew that he would not take the bait easily, so she just lay in ambush with the attitude of giving it a try. Since waiting there was no result, Celine didn't waste any time and left. After Celine left, a dark figure appeared at the door of the auditorium and walked in. The Wen family father and son were waiting anxiously at home. If they were not worried about angering each other, they would also like to follow Celine to the auditorium. Seeing her coming back alone, the three of them were stunned for a moment, and the father walked up and asked, "Where is your mother?" David was angry. Is the other party unwilling to release the person? Alex thought for a moment and said, I guess the other party probably didn't show up. With the hostages in hand, they can blackmail us endlessly. Meeting their concerned gazes, Celine sighed slightly, just like Big Brother said. That person knew how important their mother was to them, so he would not let her go easily. Supplies are different from money. Money can be saved after being obtained at one time, and it is also convenient to take it away when escaping. As long as it is hidden well, it will never be discovered in this life. Supplies are not easy to take away. Even if that person wants to take away all the supplies in Celine's space, he will need a large truck to take them away. You can imagine how much noise it will cause. Besides, everyone is short of food and clothing now. If they see mountains of supplies, they will definitely rush over to grab them. It is too risky to take all the supplies at once. In comparison, it is much simpler to choose to hold my mother hostage. Dad's heart sank. The other party didn't leave any clues. How can we find them? Alex comforted him. Dad, we can be sure that those people are in the base. We will slowly explore and investigate. They will not just take supplies once. Sooner or later, they will reveal their flaws. They only asked for 100 kilograms of rice and 50 kilograms of meat and vegetables. Either it was their first time extorting money and they didn't dare to ask for too much, or there were not many of them and there were too many supplies to take back, Celine analyzed. Yesterday, she and young Mohan searched everywhere in the base for gangs. Excluding them, there were only two possibilities. First, the other party is a small gang, and second, the crime is committed by an individual. The first fight was not without gain, and the only thing left to do next was to wait for the other party to send a second message. The next day, Celine went out to investigate, and as soon as she came downstairs, she saw young Mohan walking towards her from a distance. Is there any news about Annie? Young Mohan asked hurriedly. Celine's heart warmed when she saw the sincere expression on his handsome face. She shook her head slightly and told him what happened yesterday. Young Mohan looked around and made sure that no one was passing by. He took out a bottle of white liquid from the space. Next time they blackmail you for supplies, sprinkle this on them. Celine took it and smelled it carefully, but there was no smell. Young Mohan took out a transparent box with a hole in it, which contained a thumb-sized bee. He explained, "This is a tracking bee. The bottle contains a special liquid. Just sprinkle it on the supplies, and the bee will follow the smell." Celine was delighted when she heard this, as it really helped her a lot. After a while, she suddenly realized something. Your space can actually contain living things? Young Mohan asked in surprise. Why? Yours can't do it. Chapter 105 Constant Temperature Shed Failure. He thought all spaces were the same and hadn't thought about this problem. Celine shook her head. My space cannot contain living things. After a pause, she looked up at him and asked, Can your body enter space? Cannot. That's a pity. If the main body can enter the space, there will be no need to worry about life safety. The two discussed the issue of space, but having such a divine weapon in the end times was already a gift from God, and they didn't dare to ask for anything else. Next time they send you a letter asking for supplies, come and tell me. Young Mohan reminded. Celine agreed. Just as the two were about to leave, they suddenly felt the temperature drop sharply, as if they were in an ice cave. The constant temperature shed is out of service? Young Mohan reacted immediately. He pondered for a moment and murmured, It shouldn't be so fast. I'll go see what's going on. You go home first. The temperature has dropped again. Keep warm. You too, take out your clothes and put them on while no one is around. Young Mohan nodded and left quickly. The failure of the constant temperature greenhouse brought everyone back to reality. The extreme cold had not passed, and the freezing weather once again covered the entire base. The temperature dropped back to minus 50 degrees overnight. The only good thing was that the fog had lifted. People who were used to living under a constant temperature greenhouse were unable to adapt for a while, and soon a large group of people fell ill. The management left, and the base fell into chaos. The Wen family anxiously waited for a letter from the kidnapping gang. Dad said worriedly, "It's suddenly getting cold outside. Your mother must be in big trouble." Alex consoled him. "Dad, the failure of the constant temperature shed may not be a bad thing. Those people can't stand the cold, and they will probably come to deliver letters and ask for cotton clothes." Celine, who was sitting opposite them, nodded in agreement. "Yes, I guess it will be in the next 2 days." David, who had just returned from outside, opened the iron gate and saw a letter falling out. He picked it up and took a look at it, then rushed into the house. "Little sister, that group of people sent another letter." Celine took it and quickly opened it. It said, "I know you have cotton-padded clothes and quilts in your space. I will deliver 50 cotton-padded clothes and 50 quilts to the auditorium at 6 o'clock this evening." "It's going to be this evening. Why are you in such a hurry? It seems those people can't stand the cold anymore." 50 cotton-padded clothes, 50 quilts. That gang is quite a few people," said Dad. "David, that may not be the actual number of people. What if one person has 2 quilts?" Not long after receiving the letter, Celine immediately went to find Yang Mohan, intending to borrow his tracking bee. Yang Mohan was free and did not try to remedy the problem of the constant temperature greenhouse failing. The base had paid a large sum of money to hire him for research, but now everything that could be run away has been done, so there is no point in making any remedies. When Celine arrived at his house, Yang Mohan was practicing calligraphy. The temperature in the house was just right. The man was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. His eyebrows and eyes were focused. His jawline was beautiful, and his thin lips were tightly pursed. "You are quite free." When Yang Mohan saw her, a smile flashed in his eyes. He put down the brush and explained, "The research institutes at the base have been disbanded. I have nothing to do but practice calligraphy to cultivate my sentiments." Celine got straight to the point. "That group contacted me again, and I want to borrow your tracking bee. I'll go with you." Yang Mohan said immediately. Celine thought for a moment and nodded slightly. When the appointed time was almost approaching, Celine came to the auditorium, which was still empty and looked very eerie. She took out the cotton-padded clothes and quilt that the other party wanted, and Yang Mohan sprayed some colorless liquid on them. There wasn't much liquid sprayed, and it didn't look unusual. After doing all this, they left the auditorium. The two found a place to hide. With so many things, it was impossible for the group to move away quietly. Chapter 106 Tracking. Half an hour later, 3 tall and strong men walked into the auditorium and soon came out carrying several bags of quilts and clothes. Yang Mohan looked at them, then turned to look at Celine. "Why would that group of people come out openly? I suspect they did it on purpose to show us. How about this? I'll follow them and leave the tracking of the bees to you." Celine agreed with this idea, and she nodded slightly. "If there's an ambush, run away. Be careful. Others are helping her out of a favor, and she can't let him fall into danger. As long as she has supplies in her space, she will be able to pull that man out sooner or later." In order to confuse the enemy, Celine pretended to follow Yang Mohan to track those men. Not long after the 2 men left one after the other, several men entered the auditorium from another direction. Celine chased him out for 5 minutes, then made a sudden comeback. She quietly entered the auditorium and found that all the quilts were gone. She took out Yang Mohan's bees, opened the box, and let them fly out. Celine took out the potion again and sprayed it in front of the bee. The 2 bees smelled the scent and suddenly flew in another direction. Celine didn't hesitate and followed immediately. The bee flew over the nearby dormitory building, cafeteria, and finally came to the front of a 2-story building. The building was old and shabby, with unpainted outer walls revealing its brick structure. There was a small window on the 2nd floor, probably used to spy on the outside. Celine quietly bypassed the person guarding the gate and came to the back of the house. Fortunately, the house was not high, so she easily climbed to the roof. Buzz, 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 the 2 bees that had flown away flew back and circled in front of her. Celine breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the real kidnapper was here. She wanted to see who was so bold as to bully her. Celine was about to sneak down when she heard footsteps. She looked around and found a water tower not far away and immediately hid behind it. Zhao Chang and Lin Dong came up holding a steaming sweet potato in their hands. "Lin Dong, it's really cold today. The boss is really awesome. He got me so many cotton-padded clothes and quilts. I can have a good sleep tonight. That woman is really capable. As long as we listen to her, we will have endless supplies in the future." Zhao Chang's face was full of longing. Lin Dong glanced at him and said, "You believe everything she says. Are you stupid? Have you ever thought about where these supplies came from? You know?" Zhao Chang looked over in confusion. "It was extorted from the kidnapped woman's home. I told her to just rob that family, but she refused to agree. She was very cautious and asked us not to reveal our whereabouts. Women are timid and can't accomplish anything big," Lin Dong said contemptuously. Zhao Chang thought for a moment. "Let's interrogate that woman and find out her home address. Then we can go rob the place ourselves, and all the supplies will be ours." "Boy, you and I are thinking the same thing." The two of them burst into laughter. "Pa!" There was a sudden noise behind the water tower. The two turned their heads and looked alertly. "Who?" Zhao Chang and Lin Dong looked at each other, and both walked towards them cautiously. Just when they were about to reach the water tower, a dark shadow flashed by. They were stunned for a moment. Just as they were about to find the shadow's track, they suddenly felt a pain on the back of their neck, and both of them fell straight down. Celine clapped her hands and dragged them behind the water tower. To prevent them from waking up in the middle of the night, she took out hemp rope and rags from the space, tied them up, and gagged them. Just as she was about to leave, her eyes suddenly fell on Zhao Chang. After hesitating for a moment, she took off the man's hat and coat. Celine put on the man's clothes, pulled her hat down so low that her eyes were almost invisible, and then took a black mask from the space and put it on, then walked downstairs openly. As soon as she walked down the next step, she saw two guards, and Celine nodded to them. "Zhao Chang, where is Lin Dong?" The guard stopped her and asked. Chapter 107, Finding Mom. Celine coughed lightly and adjusted her voice, then said impatiently, "He's smoking upstairs." After saying that, she left quickly. She looked around secretly. Although the whole house only had 2 floors, there were more than a dozen rooms on each floor. There were also 2 people smoking at the stairs on the first floor. Celine roughly counted and found that there were less than 10 people inside, which would make it much easier to deal with. Buzz, 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 the bees were waiting for Celine in front. She hurried after it, and finally the bee stopped in front of an iron gate. In the room, Shu Qing threw a tattered cotton coat to her mother and said contemptuously, "Put it on." Mom had lost a lot of weight. She looked at Shu Qing coldly and threw the dirty and torn cotton coat aside. "What? You still want to freeze yourself to death? Let me tell you, it's not that easy. You are my long-term meal ticket now. As long as you are in my hands, everything in Celine's space is mine." Shu Qing smiled sinisterly, her face a little distorted, and her once pure and lovely look was gone. "How did you know Celine had room?" Mom sat in the corner, wearing thin clothes. The constant temperature greenhouse suddenly failed. The temperature outside dropped drastically, and she curled up with her hands around her body. "So, what if you can get the truth from me? You'll never be able to escape it in this life." Shu Qing was wearing the thick cotton-padded jacket he got from Celine, and his tone was full of pride. Her mother looked up at her and laughed contemptuously. "What if I commit suicide?" Shu Qing's life is not satisfactory and her heart is twisted. Rather than letting Celine support her in vain, it would be better for her to die. If I really were to be imprisoned by Shu Qing for the rest of my life, it would be the same as death, so I would rather avoid being a burden to my children. "What you said reminds me." Shu Qing's face suddenly became gloomy, and his eyes swept over his mother's hands and feet. "What? What do you want to do?" When her mother saw her approaching her, she stepped back in panic. She was not afraid of dying. What she was afraid of was being tortured by Shu Qing to the point where she could neither live nor die. Shu Qingyu took out a machete and showed a cold and cruel smile. "As long as you cut off your hands and feet, won't this problem be solved?" She also has to thank her mother for reminding her. Otherwise, she would have neglected it. Mom can't die. Otherwise, all she has done will be wasted. "Don't come over here." Mom saw half a brick nearby and thought to herself that there was a chance of winning if she fought hard. Shu Qing swung the machete in her hand fiercely, but the next second a brick hit her face. She quickly blocked it with a knife in her hand, and her mother ran out immediately when she saw it. Bang! The door was kicked open from the outside, and a man walked in. My mother was startled and immediately hid to the side. She looked vigilantly at Shu Qing not far away and the man at the door, her heart in her throat. Shu Qing saw Zhao Chang outside the door and stopped chasing her mother. "You've come just in time. Hurry up and catch that woman for me." My mother had her back against the wall, staring at the door and moving slowly. She was so nervous that her palms were sweating. Suddenly, she accidentally stepped on a stick and fell. The man immediately walked towards her and tried to help her. My mother struggled to back away, her tone full of fear. "Get away. Don't touch me." "Mom, are you okay? Are you hurt?" A clear voice rang out in the room, filled with concern. Chapter 108. Showdown, no more pretending. This familiar yet unfamiliar voice stunned both Mom and Shu Qing. Celine took off her hat and mask, revealing a delicate face as white as jade. Shu Qing widened his eyes in surprise, looking extremely nervous. Celine, how did she find this place? Didn't those people lead her away?" After Celine helped her mother up, she saw that she was wearing thin clothes, her cheeks were red from the cold, and her brows were furrowed. She immediately took out a thick cotton coat from the space and put it on her. After doing all this, she turned to look at Shu Qing with a mocking sneer on her lips. "I never thought that you were the one behind all this." Shu Qing took out his gun and pointed it at Celine, gritted his teeth, and said, "Since you have discovered us, then take out all the supplies. Otherwise, neither you nor your daughter can leave." Celine looked at her like a clown and took out a submachine gun calmly, raising her eyebrows. "How could you be so stupid as to think that there are no weapons in my space?" She dared to come alone, so she must have something to rely on. The small pistol and the submachine gun are not on the same level at all, and the opponent's decline is visibly evident to the naked eye. After a short standoff, Shu Qing slowly put down the gun. The flesh on his face trembled, and his lips turned pale. "I never thought of hurting your mother. I kidnapped her for supplies and survival. I will return the supplies to you. We will not interfere with each other in the future." My mother said angrily, "Don't listen to her nonsense. She just wanted to chop off my hands and feet. She wanted to completely control me and threaten you. She is a mean person. We can't let her go easily. Being kind to your enemies is being cruel to yourself." Celine didn't answer, but looked at Shu Qing and asked indifferently, "How do you know I have space?" "I overheard this from Tina. Not long after she arrived at the base, she fell in love with Wang Daji, who had a car and supplies, so she deliberately approached them and gained Tina's trust. Once, Tina let something slip accidentally. She didn't believe it at first and thought Tina was talking nonsense. But the end of the world has come. Is there anything more ridiculous than this? Later, she secretly observed the Wen family and found that they really had endless food and various electrical appliances that can no longer be found. Celine pondered her words and sneered. "So, from the beginning, you had ulterior motives when you contacted my mother." At this point, Shu Qing finally laid his cards on the table and stopped pretending. "Yes, I wanted to get close to you, please you, and build a good relationship with you, but in the end I failed. It was all Celine's fault. The Wen family all had a good impression of her, except her, who disliked her and insisted on making a clear distinction. The last time Wang Daji captured me and forced me to hand over supplies, was it also you who did it?" Celine asked again. Shu Qing's eyes flashed. The last time Wang Daji kidnapped Celine, it was she who instigated and planned it behind the scenes. She wanted to hide behind the scenes and reap the benefits, but who knew that Wang Daji was so useless and Celine killed him easily? Wang Daji's plan failed as he failed to approach her on purpose, so she had to take action on her own and tie up her mother. She had no other choice. The rice in the base had been eaten by the mutant rats, and there was a food shortage. In order to survive, she had no choice but to resort to this last resort. From Celine twice, which made her feel happy for a while. However, she didn't feel happy for long because she came to her door and caught her off guard. "Besides you, who else knows that I have space?" Celine looked at her coldly. Shu Qing shook his head fiercely. "No, I didn't tell anyone. She is not stupid. If she tells others about it, a bunch of people will compete with her for Celine, and then they will fight to the death. She will be outnumbered and will end up in a bad situation." Chapter 109, Successful Rescue. "Very good." Celine curled her lips in satisfaction, with a ruthless look in her eyes. Shu Qing sensed something and slowly stepped back, saying in panic, You can't go back on your word. I haven't promised anything, so how can I break my promise?" Celine didn't waste any words and just shot. Shu Qing reacted quickly and dodged the first shot, but Celine had already made up her mind not to let her go and quickly fired a second shot. Shu Qing was shot and died without giving the other party a chance to react. Bang! There was a gunshot outside the door, followed by a burst of hurried footsteps. The door was pushed open from the outside, and Yang Mohan and the Wen family father and son rushed in. Dad immediately hugged his beloved wife in his arms and comforted her softly. I'm sorry, I'm late. Alex and David silently turned to look at the culprit, Shu Qing. It's her, David murmured. Celine looked at him and asked in confusion. Why? Do you have any connection with her? David scratched his head in embarrassment. She approached me privately before, but I rejected her. Under the gaze of his younger sister, David still told the story again. One time, on his way home from get off work, he happened to see Shu Qing being bullied. Thinking that she had once saved his mother, he still helped her. From then on, Shu Qing looked for him every few days and gave him things from time to time. After he refused in person, Shu Qing gave the things to someone else and then passed them to him. David understood Shu Qing's meaning, but he had no intention of talking about love, so he returned all the things to her and refused without any hesitation. Later, Shu Qing never came again. He didn't know whether she had thought it through or given up. Celine's eyes turned cold when she heard this, and she glanced at David. Brother, she was approaching you on purpose. She even had ulterior motives when she saved Mom in the beginning. Fortunately, you controlled yourself. Shu Qing is so ugly, I don't like her. David immediately retorted, my taste is not that bad. Celine sneered. If he even likes someone like Tina, who knows when he will betray her? Alex also glanced over and said in a gentle voice, Second brother, things are different now. With my little sister around, you are still a hot commodity. There are many women who want to seduce you. Be careful and concentrate. David, it makes me sound like a playboy. He only has his family in his heart now. Young Mohan finally got a chance to interrupt. Everyone in the room has been dealt with. Your supplies are in the next room. Celine immediately went to the next room because those were her things and she had to take them. Seeing her leave, young Mohan was about to follow her, but suddenly noticed the way the Wynn brothers were staring at him. He stopped and explained, I also have my own space, and I won't leak this matter out. You can trust me. The Wynn brothers, he really doesn't consider himself an outsider. Celine violently kicked open the door of the next room, and sure enough, she saw the unfinished supplies of Shu Qing and others inside. There were few of them, and they only ate 1/3 of a bag of rice, so there was still a lot of meat and vegetables left. She gathered all the supplies, and the group quickly left. In the car, Celine returned the tracking B to young Mohan. If it weren't for your B, I wouldn't have been able to find my mother so easily this time. Dad and Mom quickly asked what was going on. Young Mohan chuckled and said, It's just a small favor. Uncle and Aunt don't have to worry about it. Seeing that he was being modest, Celine told him what happened, and her father immediately said, I must thank you for coming to our house for dinner tonight. Young Mohan couldn't refuse, so he could only agree. Then I'd better obey your command. Chapter 110 Huashuyan. The base was in complete chaos and robberies were taking place every day, and no one was spared, whether they were walking on the street or hiding at home. In just 1 month, half of the people in the base left. The remaining ones had been robbed several times and had nothing left to steal. The reason they didn't leave the base was probably because it was too cold outside and going out would mean death. These people's faces are filled with despair, numbness, and vicissitudes, like the Walking Dead. Dozens of waves of robbers have come to the building where the Wynn family lives. They come almost every day, several times a day. Even though there was an iron gate blocking the way outside, they were still overwhelmed. The Wynn family held a family meeting that day. Celine said, Order in the base has collapsed. It's not safe to stay here. I want to go to another base. What do you think? Dad was also worried that his wife would be kidnapped again. Relying on the supplies in Celine's space, they would not be subject to too many restrictions. So he nodded in agreement. I agree. David smiled and said, For me, as long as our family is together, that's all that matters. Since everyone agrees, let's think about where to go. There are 26 bases in the country, so we can always find a suitable place to settle down. Alex said. Celine paused and added, Well, young Mohan will go with us. As soon as these words were spoken, the 3 Wynn family members had different expressions. The father's face showed reluctance and confusion. Alex's face was a little gloomy, and David gnashed his teeth in hatred. My mother's expression was calm, and she was more encouraging. Celine, what are you thinking? Young Mohan and I are friends. There's nothing wrong with asking him to leave with us. There was no need for them to show such bitter and resentful expressions. Hearing this, David's face brightened instantly, and he patted his chest exaggeratedly. I was scared to death. I thought I was going to have another brother-in-law. Alex smiled again. Brother, I believe in you. The world is unstable now, and there are many scammers. Even if you want to develop further, you have to observe more. Dad exhaled quietly and said with a smile, "Come on, let's continue discussing which base to go to." Celine was speechless. Her expression changed too quickly. "Don't worry about them." Mom pulled Celine to the balcony to talk. "If you want to fall in love, Mom supports you." The main reason is that she thinks young Mohan is a really good guy. He is handsome and a good match for her daughter. He is also a researcher with high IQ and EQ. She is satisfied no matter how she looks at him. What's more, young Mohan also has his own space, so there is no need to talk about who supports whom or living off others. It's all right. Celine held her forehead helplessly. She wanted to explain, but she found that her mother was laughing at something she had imagined. The next day, Celine was about to go find young Mohan to ask him what he knew about other bases when she saw 5 large trucks, more than 20 jeeps, and more than 10 pickup trucks driving in from outside the base. The convoy drove in like a mighty dragon. The people in the base had never seen such a scene, and they all ran out to watch. Celine also stopped and stared at them curiously, wondering what these people were doing here. The convoy stopped at the central square of the base, and the people in the jeeps got off one after another. Each of them was strong and powerful, holding a gun in his hand, and they formed a protective circle. A man with an upright figure, strong features, deep brows, and firm outlines got out of the front jeep. He looked around with a strong sense of oppression. His eagle eyes swept over, and he said with thin lips, "I am Hua Shuyan, and I will officially take over M base from today." Hua Shuyan, the original male protagonist? Damn, why is he here? Celine complained in her mind, but she was more confused. Originally, Hua Shuyan did not come here. He met Tina, who was fleeing famine in City D. Many people were watching and wondering what Hua Shuyan was up to. He said he would take over, so did he ask them whether they agreed or not? Hua Shuyan looked at them calmly and continued, "I know you all have leaders, and I have supplies. We can govern together. If you are interested, come to the office building to find me." After saying that, Hua Shuyan got back into the car and drove deeper into the base. The others immediately went back to report, and for a moment everyone was watching. Hua Shuyan was right about one thing. They needed supplies, and at the moment they had no choice but to cooperate with him. Celine returned home and told the rest of the family what she had just seen. She couldn't say Hua Shuyan was the male protagonist. They were characters in a book, so she could only say, "This man is very dangerous. Try to stay away from him." "Who is this guy? Do you know him?" David asked puzzledly. Celine, "How should I put it? I don't think we know each other. I only know a few things about his background. Before the end of the world, he was a senior commander of the army. He held a high position and had a strong family background. It's hard to say why he came here. Either they occupy the land to be the king, or they have ulterior motives. We have to be on guard." Alex observed Celine's expression. It was the first time he saw worry in her eyes, and her brows were furrowed. Is that guy named Hua Shuyan so difficult to deal with? How could Celine not be worried? He is the male protagonist of the original novel, with great luck, the kind who lives to the end with a smile on his face. But she quickly calmed down. Tina was still the heroine of the original novel, but she was also defeated by her. "Are we still leaving?" The mother looked at her 3 sons, and seeing them shaking their heads to indicate they didn't know, she turned to look at her daughter. "Let's go, but don't rush. Let's see what Hua Shuyan wants to do first." Celine pondered for a moment. The family's plans were temporarily put on hold, and life went on as usual. At this time, Hua Shuyan gathered all the gang leaders together, and after careful counting, there were more than 50 people. The man frowned. They could rule together, but with so many people there would definitely be chaos. Hua Shuyan tapped the table with his fingers, and the 2 men handed out a thick stack of papers. He said in a deep voice, "Since we want to cooperate, I have to know your basic situation. Fill out this form." The man below was a little impatient, but he still picked up the pen and wrote carefully. Fortunately, there were not many questions on the form, such as name, age, number of subordinates, whether there were guns, etc. Some issues can be written truthfully, but the weapons cannot be mentioned. Some people just write nonsense, and they come to this meeting just to join in the fun. Hua Shuyan is so young. How much ability can he have? He just relies on a few people and a few guns. Soon, the men collected the watches, and Hua Shuyan screened them in front of them. Those who manage fewer than 30 people are not included in the co-governance. He threw the discarded watches into the trash can, and finally only 20 watches were left. Hua Shuyan handed the watch in his hand to the person next to him and said indifferently, "Read out the names that have stayed." Chapter 111 Co-Governance Assessment. The others looked at him in confusion. Hua Shuyin's men took the watch and began to read it. Zhang Chao, Huang Yue, Jiang Feng, and others stay. Others whose names were not called can leave. Mr. Hua, what do you mean? The remaining 30 or so people looked very unhappy. It was obvious that the bastard looked down on them. Hua Shuyin sat there with his back straight, his fingers crossed on the table, and looked at the person who spoke with deep eyes, and said coldly, I don't support idle people. Sorry, you are not within my consideration. Please go in. You, just go, who cares? One of them stood up and left first. The others snorted coldly and walked away. They were unwilling to endure this humiliation. There were only 20 people left at the scene. They looked at each other and the people around them, wondering what Shuyin was trying to do. Since we are going to govern together, it is obviously not appropriate to have too many people. The ones who were eliminated just now had too few subordinates. You who are present are the ones who have the right to speak in the base. You can get to know each other. Shuyin had a serious face, but he did things efficiently and clearly. No one present dared to look down on him anymore, and the playful expressions on their faces also faded a little. Mr. Hua, how do you want to govern together? There must be specific divisions. Do we also need positions? How much supplies do you plan to give us? A bald man raised his feet and placed them on the table. He rested his hands on his neck, leaned back in his chair, and asked nonchalantly. Shuyin had been in the army for many years and hated people without discipline the most. However, considering that today was the first day and the specific rules had not yet been discussed, he did not care, but his face became even colder. Everyone here has a position. The level of your position depends on your ability. To sum up, the more subordinates and weapons you have in the base, the higher your status will be. What if we don't want to govern together? The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. The others who were silent were just watching the show. Everyone wanted to rule the base, but why should the one with the surname will be the boss and they have to be the younger brothers? There is a saying that a strong dragon cannot defeat a local snake. As long as they unite, it will be a piece of cake to deal with a guy named Hua. I advise you to think twice. As I said before, I have the supplies. People die for money and birds die for food. Only those who are given food will have their subordinates rebel against them in a moment. We are all smart people, there is no need to say too much. Being too straightforward will make no one look good. As expected, everyone present was silent. The reason they had attracted so many people to follow them was partly because of the temptation of supplies and partly because of weapons. Recently, robberies have been happening every day. In order to avoid retaliation, they had no choice but to join a gang with abundant weapons and great power. Hua Shuyin was a man of extraordinary bearing and swift tactics. His subordinates followed strict military orders and were obviously from regular troops. They were no match for him. A head-on confrontation is obviously not the best way. If things go wrong, everyone might run away and they won't even have the right to sit here and talk. After weighing the pros and cons in their minds, the leaders of the two most powerful gangs stood up and said, Mr. Hua, we all want peace in the base, so we decided to follow you. Mr. Hua is a young talent with great literary and military skills and a unique vision. I believe you can lead our base to peace and restore its former prosperity. Those with the greatest power were recruited, and the others simply gave up waiting and followed the big guys to make a living. Others stood up one after another, and compliments came one after another. Hua Shuyin was very satisfied with their choice, but pretended not to hear their praises. Very good. Thank you all for your trust. Now, let's begin the first test. Everyone present was stunned. What the hell? There's an assessment? You heard me right. It's an assessment. I said the ranking of your positions is determined by your strength. Hua Shuyin saw the puzzlement in his eyes and continued, those who left just now don't have many people under their command, but if they unite, they can also turn the world upside down. So the first assessment will be the ranking according to the number of gangs you have taken over. Zhang Chao. There are smaller groups in the base with even fewer people. Do they count? Forget it. Hua Shuyin nodded. I'll only give you 2 days. Others were whispering below. Hua Shuyin waited for a while, but no one spoke, so he asked again, any other questions? If not, see you in 2 days. Those people left one after another. Soon, only Hua Shuyin and a few of his confidants were left in the meeting room. Mr. Hua, other bases are richer than here. Why did you choose Base M? Lu Guang asked puzzledly. They headed north, passing through several bases along the way, and finally Hua Shuyin chose this place. Although there is chaos inside other bases, there are local troops suppressing them. All the management of M base has fled, so it is much easier to deal with these gangs. Threats and inducements are enough. Lu Guang, go and help me find someone, was Shu Yan said again. Who was Mr. Hua looking for? Tina. Lu Guang agreed, feeling suspicious, as this seemed to be a woman's name. Could it be Mr. Hua's sweetheart? Chapter 112. Fortune and Honor in Danger.